All right, we did it. We did it. We're here. We're doing it. Off to the races. Yesterday's stream was a total disaster. On and off and on and off. And it was completely my internet's fault. My internet blinked in and out. I noticed today I had a blink out even. So crossing those fingers. Crossing those fingers. Hopefully today the stream will actually be stable. If it is unstable today, I am definitely going to call in, but I know that it was a server issue with my internet, and I feel like what are they supposed to do with it? But I'm willing to accept that like once, but if it happens again today, I will definitely contact somebody, get it going on. So far, so stable. I hate that, man. It really, really reminds me about how fragile this whole thing is, right? This whole thing can come down just like a boom at a moment's notice, you know? Like we take for granted that we're teaching these rocks how to think, right? We're just teaching these rocks how to think, and that's normal. Okay. Today was a lovely day for me. Had a friend come in, right? We sat around, chatted about the nature of life and reality. It's always very existential, always very religious. She is somebody who loves to study myth. She studies the Celtic myths and studies the Grecian myths and all of that kind of stuff, but she's never done a big dive into the Bible. And so she's just about to kick off on that. And I was able to talk to her about the Bible and why I think it's important and why I think it's an interesting document and its failings and its shortcomings and how our society is odd because there's a lot of people walking around in our society pretending like they read the Bible and they don't. Like very straightforwardly. Like the Bible is an anti-wealth document. It is an anti-capitalist document. It's explicitly the case. Like the leader of the movement, Christ himself, they are Christians, right? Walks around saying, give your money to the poor. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. James has a beautiful condemnation of the rich, right? If there is something that the Christian Gospels are absolutely convincing of, it is that the accumulation of wealth is a sin and is a problem, right? But to listen to the Christians of today talk about it, I mean, they don't. They simply don't, right? And to stand around saying, like, oh, it's up to you, buck up, shoulders back, right? Bootstraps, all that kind of stuff. Like, you can't call yourself a Christian and make those statements. Flatly. Like, read the book once. You cannot, like, the story of the Good Samaritan, right? The idea that, like, here's Christ telling a story. Hey, Harry. Hey, Vince. How you guys doing? The idea that Christ tells a story about how a Samaritan, who at the time was like an outsider in the society, helped a poor man on the street, right? And that's like a natural good. Well, today's modern conservatives and liberals walk by the man clapped in the street and tells him to get a job. That's what's going on. So like these people are frauds. Like we're living in a fraudulent society. Tired of Ontario? Carlos Berry. Have you seen the footage of the alleged shackled Uyghurs? I mean, no, but I assume it's bullshit. And they've done this over and over again, Carlos, where they'll like show you a picture of like incarcerated Uyghurs, and then somebody does like a moderate amount of research and is like, this is literally a picture taken of like a prison, like and the people here are not Uyghurs, like that kind of stuff. Loved your song on the last stream. Well, thank you, Lawnmower Man. I appreciate it. That's high praise coming from Lawnmower Man himself. Oh, I can't say your name one more time. That's the rule. Ford 2022 is trending for a bit. Too many optimistic NDPers, liberals thinking he would lose. It will be a PC minority for sure. I think we'll see. We'll see, man. The election season is the time, man. Election season is it, right? Things can swing real wildly come election time. And especially given, like, it's bad news for Ford that he is experiencing the decline in his polling data outside of election periods. That's always a really bad sign. Like, what you really want as a politician, right? Well, you want like 100% support. That's what you want as a politician. But if you're realistic, right? You should hit the support you hit when you're elected, and if that support is maintained, right? That's your best case, right? Not best case, but that's a good thing. Like, it's good if it keeps on going, right? Steady, slow and steady. And you should expect to see like increases and then a dip back down, and as long as it dips back down to where you were when you were elected, right? And if it starts to dip down below that, then you got to start doing stuff, right? But I was elected with this much support, that's good, right? Ford was elected with like this much support. He had a big upswell, and then when he's way down right now. He's way down right now. So like, if I'm Doug Ford, I'm very worried about what's going to happen in this election season. That's why this highway thing is a gambit. It's a gambit for them. They're going to try to make the election all about this big project, and they're going to try to really sell people on the idea of this big project. We can all come together and build this thing that would have been a big deal in the 50s or 60s, right? That like, but now is like a joke. Honestly, like the Highway 413 is a joke. Like it's a cruel joke, considering who Ford is and who the conservatives are now. Like, if they were talking about installing high-speed rail, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm listening. But they're not. They're talking about highways, like the opposite of what we need to be building. Globe and Mail, N95 medical or cloth face masks, which is best against Omicron? Canada's latest guidance, yeah. Just wear a mask, for God's sake. Saw it on Reddit. It was a drone video. Yeah, of course it was a drone video. No, I don't trust any of this stuff, dude. I don't trust any of this. Like, and it's gonna be like and if somebody vets it, it's gonna end up being like like literally it'll be like, we found footage of shackled Uyghurs. Oh my God! And then it turns out that it'll be like a film shoot. Right? Like this is the scale of the lies that they're telling about the Uyghur genocide. Like, literally taking like absolute, just the misrepresentation is fucking real. So I don't believe it at all. Like, and I'm 0% now. Like, nope, I don't believe it. I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to need some hardcore evidence at this point. Like, I'm going to need to see, like, for God's sakes, like the BBC went into these facilities, right? Didn't find a fucking genocide. The documents that were being shown, it's like not a genocide. It's like organizing a prison system, right? Because there is a prison, right? There are prisons still, right? And every society has prisons. When societies commit a genocide, right, they don't do it in secret, right? The claim that's being made by people who are saying that there is a Uyghur genocide going on is that the Chinese people are somehow managing to organize an 8 million people large genocide without talking about it, without creating any documentation, without organizing it whatsoever. It's just happening, right? When the Canadians did the residential school system genocide, they were very open about it. They voted for it in Parliament. When the Americans enslaved the black continent and committed a genocide against the First Nations people, they were very open about it. When Adolf Hitler committed a genocide against the Jews during the Holocaust, he was very open about it. He wrote a book. He was elected after having written that book. Like, genocides don't happen accidentally, and they don't happen in secret, right? They don't happen like hush-hush behind the scenes. When societies commit to projects of genocide, they're very open about it. It's not something that just happens. So this idea that like, oh, well, there's a drone and we found a secret hidden, like, that's not real. Like, it doesn't work that way. It never has, and it never will. Ever. There's no such thing as a secret genocide. like it's kind of absurd to even contemplate. So yeah, I'm sure they took a drone video of some group of people doing something and are claiming that they're Uyghurs and there's this kind of thing and that the other thing, but it's bullshit. I almost guarantee it. Like, I'm like 99.9%. Why can't Maxime Bernier's People's Party use its name in Ontario's next election? Because of this man. Yeah, Maxime Bernier's like the People's Party exists because the Conservative Party is going to the left. That's why. Oh yeah, The Hobbit last night. It was great. Love the Lord of the Rings series. Fantastic. Voted PC last time, going for NDP this time around. Unfortunately, I'm at Bowmanville. Hey, you got to do what you got to do, man. You got to do what you got to do. Glad to hear you're not voting Conservative anymore. Honestly. Like, glad to hear it. V for Vendetta. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we have literal evidence of genocide in Canada, but yeah, let's condemn China without evidence. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the guy that's presenting the evidence, of course, is like a fundamentalist Christian, Adrian Zenz, right? Like a fundamentalist Christian who's outright said, like, God sent me on a mission to destroy China. Like, yeah, there's your source, right? Reputable. Yeah, the New York Times tried to hide the Holocaust by putting reports next to soap shoe polish ads, but like they were still reporting on it. You could still look at it, right? It was still there. There is a genocide in the U.S. with the pandemic, poverty in prison. People are being thrown out on the streets due to medical bills. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a crisis. I mean, oof. To call it a genocide, I mean, maybe, could it get to that scale? And could you declare it a genocide based on class, right? You can have class-based genocides. Like, that can happen. Like, the rich just decide to destroy the poor. And I mean, are we going to get to that scale? Is there a systemic attempt to actually eradicate the poor? I mean, you can definitely call the prison system a slave system. It's for sure a slave system, without a doubt. I don't think it can be argued otherwise. Like, it's a total failure in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of actually being like a societal good. It's a total failure from any angle except slaves make our stuff. Like, as long as that's what you're looking for. The absolute bollocks of people saying they can destroy China. Yeah, I mean, like, that's not how it's going to work, right? That's just not how it's going to go. Like, China seems fairly unified, right? And China, like, the Communist Party seems very interested in unifying China and keeping them unified. At this stage in the game, the best I think that the American empire can do is just slow down the growth. That's really all it can do anymore. Because it can't launch conventional warfare. It can't directly go against China in serious ways, right? Because there is the threat of nuclear bombardment, right? Mutually assured destruction, that sort of thing. China has shown that it has the capability to strike a target with a nuclear bomb anywhere on the planet with its hypersonic missile test, right? Like, and also Chinese computing is faster now than the Americans, right? Like, China is launching like 6G quantum computing, like this sort of stuff. So China's got the technological edge, while America just mires, right? Just like wallows, and China is going to be able to deploy and react faster than America, straight up. Just it is going to be the case, and it's only a matter of time until the Chinese just move into Taiwan, and the Americans are just like, hey, and that'll be the end of it. And like, that will be the moment when the narratives surrounding China, the idea that China will collapse, the idea that China's in free fall, the idea that China's all, blah, 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 or that China is a rising star, right? All of that will change when China moves into Taiwan. When they move into Taiwan, it will be, that is their moment where they are establishing their dominance. Like, at least their own security as a person within their own borders, right? The explicit statement that we will do as we want, and we don't need permission from America, nor will America stand in our way, right? That will be the moment. So it's just kind of a matter of time. Like, when is that going to happen? We'll see. We'll see. And yeah, all Uyghur propaganda is coming out of the CIA, separatist groups stationed outside China, and like, who's the source for this drone video? I bet you it's like Radio Free Asia, like straight up CIA operations. Like, Not even the CIA, the U.S. State Department admits there's no evidence. Yeah, they're just misled idiots. No, they're not misled. Like, they know what they're doing. Like, they know what they're doing. Like, they want to spread around the Uyghur genocide narrative into their own populace so that when they fuck with China, the populace will let them, right? Like, it's very straightforward. Like, I mean, for God's sakes, like, we didn't do anything when we, like, literally invaded a country. Like, we invaded Iraq, Afghanistan. Like, we go in and destroy places, and the population is just like, oh, yeah, okay, la, 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 la. Like, we don't care. Like, when we invaded Vietnam, like, Cambodia, all those places, like, nobody gave a fuck. Right? There were protests over the Iraq invasion, but, like, it didn't culminate in anything. It didn't go anywhere. Right? So, like, what's it going to take? I don't think people realize how the establishment became established. It simply stole the land and property off the poor, surrounded themselves with weak-minded sycophants for protection, gave themselves titles, and have been wielding power ever since. Tony Benn. All right, let's do the number. The first and most important opinion on Western opposition to China are those of the corporations that make billions in profit and business with China. Crickets from them. Yeah. Here we go. I'm going with 6. I'm feeling like a 6 today.
Here we go for today's number. It's January 13,
a 7 from Mock, of course.
2022. 10 balls.
2 from Harry. Here we go.
Each ball has a number.
Got a 5.
Numbers
Good to
1
see you,
through 10.
Here we go.
Swirl the numbers.
Love it. So right now we got a 50% chance to hit this.
Pick a number.
Pick a number.
Today's number is...
Drum roll. 2. Harry. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Da da da. So I actually have something kind of special today. I actually have a new song that I wrote over the weekend that I've been kind of refining a little bit. So I'm going to play this new piece. Why not today? I played it for my friend today. She liked it. So, and I actually think I can play it from memory for the most part. So let's see how this goes. Jackie works 3 part-time jobs. She still can't pay the rent. And Johnny lives out on the street. He begs for change and cigarettes. And God and all his angels, they cry in agony. Whoa, why won't you read your scriptures and set your people free? And Nancy does another dance. She'll be okay tonight. And Michael throws man on the street, then cries with all his might. And God and all his angels, cry in agony. Whoa, why won't you read your scriptures and set your people free? And Jenny works another double shift. She cannot take the stress. And Billy counts his quarters while he puts his mind to rest. And God and all his angels, they cry in agony. Whoa, why won't you read your scriptures and set your people free? God and all his angels, they cry in agony. Why won't you read your scriptures and set your people free? Yeah, I feel that one. I feel that one. Nothing drives me crazier. Like, at least the capitalists that are saying that, like, their system of wealth extraction is good. Like, it's the people who are clutching onto their Bible. It's the people who are walking around pretending like we've got the word of God. I can't take it anymore, man. Like, these people are fucking frauds. Like, frauds is the word to use. And I've got to say it, and I'll say it again and again. Catholic, Unitarian, Baptist, Anglican, I don't care. Pick your denomination, right? Evangelical, I don't care. They are all frauds. No exceptions. Like, no exceptions. Even the ones that are, like, trying their hardest and doing their best are complete and total frauds. And they're frauds for very clear reasons. Step 1, vote for the system of poverty. Ensure that there are poor people in the society. Vote liberal, vote conservative. And at this point, vote NDP. Right? Vote for these frauds who are maintaining the system of poverty. Continue supporting them, continue voting with them and for them. Step 2, turn around and say to the congregation, oh, but the poor people. So use the poor people you generate from the system of poverty that you support as tokens in order to get these people to pull at their heartstrings, to have them donate money to you. Take a small sliver of that, do like a grill on Thursdays or whatever, right? Like collect like toques for the poor or whatever, right? And then take the lion's share of the money for yourself right? So that you can build these fucking cathedrals and pay for these people to like read from a book that they don't actually follow. And the only religious person I will pay any attention to, any whatsoever, right? The only religious leader I will pay attention to is one that is organizing people and galvanizing them into the streets. That is the only way that these frauds can reclaim their positions of authority. If they join us in the streets, because God knows they're not leading. God knows they're not actually putting their energy where it needs to go. That should they actually come out into the streets, it will be because the alternative will be to be abandoned by the people. We need the priests and the pastors and the rabbis and the imams and all of them to come into the streets and demand an end to this system of poverty. But they won't do it because they benefit from it. To a man, to a woman, to an individual. The system itself is fraudulent. Read your fucking scriptures. Set these people free. Fuck, I'm so done. Like, I'm so fucking done with these fucking frauds. I can't even believe it. And now we're starting to see these expressions come through even the corporate-owned media. The Toronto Star is owned by people who donated to Doug Ford's campaign. And even they are beginning to print. Federal government's failure to tax the very rich is unconscionable. Shunnable? Why am I fucking this up? Unconscionable. I did it. I fucking did it. Paradise for the Few, January 7th. It is so disheartening that in spite of report after report, our federal government has failed to implement a substantial wealth tax on those making enormous amounts of money who could easily afford to pay much, much more in tax. As well, they have failed to eliminate loopholes that allow the filthy rich to make money here in Canada and park it elsewhere in the world to avoid paying taxes that the rest of us pay. This is unconscionable. I'm fucking it up. I don't care. We don't need small changes in tax law. We need an overhaul of the entire system so that the very wealthy who take advantage of all the benefits of living and making money in Canada finally pay their fair share. A first step might be to publish a list of names of those who are earning excessive compensation in public spaces, such as the Toronto Star, for example. In taking advantage of pandemic relief to compensate their CEOs, those companies and CEOs should be required to return every penny that went to executive compensation. Only the money that was actually used to retain those workers employed by the company should be exempt from this requirement, and this should definitely exclude the CEOs. Canada could and should set a fair tax standard that we all live by. And my fair tax standard, I think if you have $10 million, you're done. Like, it's finished. Like, you don't need more than that. You don't. The only reason to have more than $10 million, right, is to fuck around with people. Right? You can talk about having, like, a housing market and all that kind of stuff all you want. But as long as one person can just buy up the whole market because they have hundreds of billions of dollars at their disposal, right? Like, we are generating a system of enslavement that is designed to enslave us. And by allowing even a single billionaire you think is actually trying to help, even if you fool yourself into believing that this billionaire is actually attempting to help, the existence of the billionaire ensures the existence of mass poverty. By definition. And even if the billionaire wanted to help these people, the amount of despair that is caused by the existence of the billionaire can't respond to fast enough. And the only way then for this billionaire to ameliorate the suffering of the people he's impoverishing is to give his money away. Read your scriptures. Give your money to the poor. And so let's just do that. Let's be done with this fraudulent game of wealth accumulation. Let's be done with it. Set the tax rate at $10 million, 100% over that. I don't give a fuck. You want to punish success? Yes, I would like to punish successful wealth hoarders. Just like I punish successful serial killers. Just like I would like to punish successful rapists. Just like I would like to punish successful burglars. Just like I would like to punish successful murderers. Right? Yes, I would like to punish successful impoverishers. I would like to punish people who successfully manage to hoard so much wealth that they impoverish the entire society. Yes, I would very much like to punish those successful people. Without a doubt. And I find the people who are defending them to be evil. Evil beyond the ability to repent. Be done with this. End this grift. And these liberals are not going to do it. Straight up. These liberals are never going to do it. They have been completely corrupted by the capitalist death cult. They are not interested. They are not interested in helping. They are interested in looking like they're helping, to con gullible rubes into continuing to vote liberal or conservative. And more it's looking NDP as well. Which is why the only way we are going to get these psychopaths to respond rationally to us is if we surround the halls of power and demand an end to this madness. The pandemic relief to corporations, which saw not only the greatest profits by elites, but also the largest transfer of public wealth in history of public wealth. Nationalize these businesses now. Yeah. Like, private ownership of the means of production is a failure. It simply does not work. Outright. And it's become obvious. It's become very plain to anyone with any kind of ethical or moral perspective whatsoever. Like, the reality of the disgraceful conversation that we are having in this nation is we are genuinely discussing with one another whether or not people should have food and shelter. We are not discussing whether or not, or we are not discussing how to get people food and shelter, right? That's simply not a discussion that we are having, right? We are not discussing how to get people food and shelter, not seriously, right? Because the solution of just get a job obviously isn't working. Many people have multiple jobs, right? And with inflation going crazy and housing prices losing control, rent spiking, none of which is the fault of the poor or the individuals or the working class who simply cannot catch up. These jobs don't pay the rent anymore. Why would anyone actually participate in this? Why should anyone participate in this? So that's a non-starter. That's a non-solution. And because that solution has failed and doesn't work, the capitalist class refuses to have a conversation about alternatives. Alternatives like give housing to the poor, give food to the poor, give money to the poor. You know, the Christian solutions that exist in their book they don't read, but pretend like they care about. the only thing we have left. Because they are not responding to the question, how do we feed and clothe the poor? And because they refuse to go along communist or socialist lines, the question has now changed. Well, should we? Such is the disgraceful state of our nation. And it is disgraceful that we are turning to our fellow citizens, that we are turning to our brothers and our sisters, to our sons and our daughters, and we are saying to them, oh, you can't get food and shelter? Too bad. Go get a job that doesn't pay the rent. And there does come a point where you start to have to conclude that they're doing it on purpose. They know that the solution they're offering, just get a job, doesn't work. They're aware of it. That they are choosing abandonment on purpose. Because they would rather you live on the street than they have less dollar monies in their account. That their quality of life will decline not even a single iota. Not even a tiny little bit. That they will still have access to the best cars, the best houses, the best food. All of these things they will still have. That will not change. That will never change. The problem is that they won't have the pile of money. And in many cases, it's just a number on a screen. That's how despicable we are as a people, how disgraceful we are. That we refuse to even give up the concept or idea of wealth. It's not even an assault on the actual living standards of these people. It's not even an attack on the quality of their basic life. Like, tell Jeff Bezos to stop shooting rockets into space. Like, that's literally what we're talking about here. Yeah, Western politics is so vague and shallow. Well, just like its people, right? Just vague and shallow. Saw an article where a renter on disability had their rent raised $350 and then was told to shovel their own driveway by a firm who purchased the property. Evil. Yeah, evil is the word. Like, Noam Chomsky has an interesting statement where he says evil doesn't even begin to approach it. Like, we are destroying the species to stuff money into already overstuffed bank accounts. Evil doesn't even begin to approach it. We don't even have the language to describe how disgraceful and despicable this is. Like, how evil this is. The language to describe the suicidal, narcissistic, pathetic nature of this hasn't even been invented. Like, I genuinely believe, in my heart of hearts, that the billionaire class is hell-bent on destroying the species because their massive accumulation of wealth has made them so narcissistic and so psychopathic that they view the existence of reality itself as existing strictly for their benefit. That everyone around them is simply an NPC in the single-player game that they are playing. And it's a game that, by definition, kills them. And so, which one of these two narratives sounds more realistic? That the narcissistic psychopath class will humble itself before the might and power of an almighty universe that has, by the wheel of fate, determined that their death is inevitable? Or while they go out, they destroy the thing that kills them. Which one of those two seems more realistic when we're talking about this narcissistic psychopath class? Isn't the deal of capitalism that if you can't profit, you fold? Not the taxpayer, probably their own underpaid employee bailing you out to keep afloat. If that's the case, abolish all debt now. Yeah, I mean, that's always been the propaganda, right? The propaganda of the capitalist is like, oh, you can't make your business work. Well, down it goes. But the reality is that once you attain a certain level of wealth, you buy the political class, right? Why shouldn't you? That's why wealth accumulation is dangerous, because you can buy the political class, and they have. Like, the political class exists only as an edifice. It's strictly theatrical. Like, this is why I rarely, like, comment on, like, oh, the Republicans said this, and the Democrats said that, or the conservatives said this, and the liberals say that. I rarely comment on it, because it's strictly theater. It's only being done for the benefit of the people who believe that what they're seeing is real in any meaningful way, which it isn't, right? That the game is very simply, the conservatives are there to completely destroy the civil society. That's their role, is to assault the workers, destroy the workers, and enact a class war. That's the role of the conservatives and what they are there to achieve and what they are there to do. The liberals are there to simply maintain the ground gained by the conservatives. They don't, and if they pull back and cede anything to the working class, it's extraordinarily tiny. It's never been smaller than under these liberals, right? These liberals have given up almost nothing, right? What? Legalized marijuana, they banned straws, right? What else? They put like a 1% tax on wealth over $250,000. Like, whoopity-doo in Kalamazoo. Right? Whoopity fucking do in Kalamazoo. And and then when the populace grumbles enough, right? Well, what happens? Well, they go back to the conservatives who kick up the class war, right? So it's like a ratchet, right? Click, click, and then you can't go back. Click, 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 right? And in many ways, I actually think the liberals are the eviler of the two. Especially these liberals, right? Like, Pierre Elliott Trudeau's liberals actually did things, right? They actually helped the society in meaningful ways. You can point to things. Yeah, like the universal healthcare system. They, like, sure, the NDP were involved in that and all that kind of stuff, and the liberals were pushed to it, but they did it, right? The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? Like, these are very clear-cut, like, black and white, like, good things that definitely existed, right? The nationalization of the fossil fuel industry, right? So, like, why are these liberals so weak and pathetic? Because they're completely bought by the capitalist death cult. They're completely bought. And the people who are voting for them are just rubes at this point. Like, just completely gullible. And the sad reality, though, is that the NDP has been just as captured. Right? Take a look at Horgan. Take a look at what's her name, Rachel, in and fucking Andrea Horwath is no different. Like, why is Andrea Horwath offering nothing? We're gonna raise the minimum wage to $20 by 2020, like 2030 or something. Like, get fucked. Like, get fucked. Oh, good, I'll be able to pay my rent in 10 years. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, we're in a goddamn crisis. Like, these are crises. These are crises. There are people in the streets, for Christ's sakes. Yeah, it's like the Democrats in the U.S. People think they are the good guys, but they don't realize they are also their enemies. Or this narrative that exists in the, where, oh, you got to vote for the lesser of two evils. Like, we acknowledge that the Democrats aren't good, but we'd rather fight against them than fight against the blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, so, like, you're acknowledging that you have to fight these guys, but you're fighting completely on their terms. You do nothing politically important until you put a like a piece of paper in a ballot box, which is fighting on their terms. Like, these people are psychopaths. Stop fighting on their terms. Right? Their rules are irrelevant. Surround the halls of power. Cease pretending like you can't. Cease pretending like voting every 4 years matters whatsoever. Right? The only people it actually matters to is the politicians specifically. Right? Which is to say that, oh no, I'm no longer the governor. Right? But the next governor will act in the same way or worse. Right? Like, politics in the United States and Canada is now strictly vanity. It is strictly a vanity project. So that these people can say, I'm an MPP. Right? I'm the premier. Right? Like, they don't give a fuck. They don't care. And they're not interested in caring. Right? The only thing they're interested in is convincing you that they care. That's it. And if they can do that by lying to you, like the liberals have constantly done, by lying to you, and then you go and you vote liberal, well, why shouldn't they then? Like, so you vote liberal, they break all their promises like they always have and always will continue to do. And then next election you vote for them again. Well, why should they bother? Like, just lie. Right? Like, just lie. It's easy. Right? Yes, I definitely care about climate change. Yes, we here at the Liberal Party will do everything we can to fight for climate change. No, they don't. Everything they've ever done on the climate change file was literally handed to them by the fossil fuel industry. Like, literally everything. Like, but as long as you keep voting liberal, right? Liberal! Then the idea that if I vote NDP, I'm giving conservatives a vote, yeah, that's probably the reason the liberals want. Yeah, the classic, right? But, like, the liberals and the conservatives are the same party, right? Like, they're not different. Like, they really aren't. Like, they work together. They're allies. So, like, voting, like, and honestly, I'm more and more becoming of the opinion that, like, voting is, like, the least, like, it's the least important thing. It truly is. Like, being politically active, actually showing up to events, going to places, disrupting political life, making life uncomfortable for these politicians. Like, that's what the populace should be doing. Because, like, they've all abandoned us, right? They don't give a fuck about us. They live in Richistan with their owners, right? They're just surrogates. Like, and it's not like we make life hard for them, right? Like, these people are living the best lives that the society can provide. Like, their job is like a fucking part-time job, right? If you call what they do work, which I don't, like, oh, just take a cue card from this guy and read it? Oh, tough job. Tough job. How much you paid for that? $200,000 a year? Holy shit. Man, what a sweet gig. Literally just take cue cards from industry and read them out loud and then, like, sign whatever document they give you. Like, man, that's tough. Tough to be a fucking politician in Canada and the United States, man. Like, make their lives hard. Force them to walk by thousands of people demanding their resignation and a revolution. Like, that's how you get the New Deal. Right? And I'll say it over and over and over again. The mistake that the communists and socialists made under FDR was that they relented before the means of production were transferred to the hands of the working class. They accepted the capitulations, they accepted the concessions given to them by the capitalist class. And now we're facing an extinction event because of that mistake. And it was a mistake. And when we are faced with that moment again, when the capitalists have capitulated everything, we cannot make the same mistake. we have to remove the means of production from the hands of the sociopath, psychopath class. Or else they'll just create another extinction event for our children. And next time, they'll do it faster. Because it's obviously their goal. Like, it's obviously their goal. It would be so easy to stop this. It would be easy to stop this. Right? And there's a million things that we could be doing. But we're just not interested. Because it's pretty clear to me that the billionaire class wants to destroy the planet. Like, they see the comet coming and they're like, man, I cannot wait for that comet to hit. I'm so looking forward to when that comet hits. Things will be so much better for me and my family when that comet hits. What is worse is Canada's unelected Senate. Patronage appointments till death do us part. They laugh at the idea of Chinese democracy, yet we have this sham. Well, what's odd about that, though, Harry, is that the Senate seems to be fairly left-wing. Like, they're writing letters saying, like, hey, a UBI, let's go. Like, they're doing that kind of stuff. So, it's odd, but... Yep, if voting would be meaningful, they would have already made it illegal. Exactly. Well, and it's coming, right? Don't fool yourselves, right? It's coming. Like, they will happily do away with the democratic system. Like, why do you think all of these corporations and, like, people like Bezos and Musk, like, they don't comment on January 6th, right? They're none of these wealthy billionaires are standing up being like, this is reprehensible, we need to protect our democracy and all that, because they don't care, right? If Donald Trump managed to foment a coup and actually overwhelmed the system in the United States, and there was actually like a coup moment, and he overthrew it, and suddenly he was like the dictator and king or whatever you want to call him, whatever name he would give himself. He'd probably just stick with president because that's his only ambition, is to be the president, right? Well, the billionaire class would be like, okay, all right, like, oh, it's Trump now, okay, like, they don't care. And in fact, I'm more or less of the opinion that the billionaire class would be quite happy if the democratic system collapsed. Because the democratic system is the only, what they would consider legitimate way to challenge their power any longer. Right? Like, their nightmare scenario is that the populace actually does manage to elect enough people in order to tax away their wealth. Right? So just be rid of the system that can threaten to do that. Just be rid of it. Right? Have a king. Right? King of America. Mulroney didn't have enough conservative senators to pass a free trade agreement, so he asked the Queen to allow the appointment of 8 senators to ram it through. She gave it royal assent. Yeah, of course. Like, it's not like these senators are going to actually stand up for anything, right? Like, again, like, the Canadian system exists, right? It exists primarily as a system to dispense bad news into the populace. That the Queen says something, and so the system sends it through, right? That's what it's for. No, the Senate doesn't introduce bills. Honestly, what the Senate is there for is to just sort of stand in the way. Like, that's it. Like, you would see this. Like, let's say a Communist Party actually managed to surge up and seize the House and get a majority. Well, suddenly you would see a bunch of obstructionism from the Senate. Like, that's what you would see. Like, as that the Senate ultimately is there to protect capital, which, in my view, is why they are supporting a basic income and why they're pushing on a basic income, because they understand that capital is under threat in significant ways. And they're trying to be the voice of reason, right? They're trying to say, like, hey, can we, like, try to save this system? Can we not destroy capitalism? Because that's what they're doing. Like, that's what's happening. And that's why we will ultimately see a basic income. But the basic income will be completely eliminated by other means and other measures, right? Like, these capitalists are not interested in stability. They're just simply not interested in stability. And they're explicit about that. For God's sakes, you've got Alan Greenspan famously said, like, former head of the chair of the Fed, right? literally said in public, on the public record, you can go find it, that the goal of the American system should be to destabilize people's lives, right? To make workers' lives harder and more difficult, because they know that desperate people will take less wages. They know. Like, so they're very upfront about it, right? It's not a secret. It's just something they don't really spread around or talk about. Yeah, China has a 100-year plan. We get chaos. That's called let the market decide, right? Let the free market decide. Let chaos reign. Like that's what it is. Listen, no one is vilifying rich people. They are villains. If you run a billion-dollar company, give yourself millions in dollars in benefits, but pay your individual workers less than a living wage and give them shitty insurance, what are you if not a villain? It's really weird to me that we can't get a good Superman movie, right? And the reason why we can't get a good Superman movie is because any good Superman movie right now would be about overthrowing this system. That a figure like Lex Luthor, Jeff fucking Bezos, would be in direct confrontation with Superman. Oh, big surprise, the rich can't tell a story about Superman defeating Lex Luthor in this corrupted society. So I got some COVID stories here, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the COVID narrative. I'm going to start with this one, because I've always promised myself that I want to platform people on the front line. Staff are calling in sick every day. How this ER nurse is coping with the Omicron surge. Aram Chogala, an ER nurse at Sunnybrook Hospital and Scarborough Centenary, lost her father to COVID last April. 9 months later, her ERs are busier and shorter staffed than ever before. Here's what it's like for her to work in the ER right now. Last year, I lost my father to COVID. It was April of 2021, and he wanted to get the vaccine, but he didn't meet the age requirement at the time. He followed all the guidelines, and he still got sick from a close contract at work. One day he called me and said he felt a bit under the weather. Later, my mom called to say he was short of breath, and I called an ambulance. He came into the ER in Scarborough where I was working, and my heart just dropped into my stomach. He was admitted, and a day or two later he was on life support. He stayed for about a month. I would work my shifts in the ER, and then I would walk to the ICU to pray for my father and talk to him. It seemed like he was recovering, but he suddenly made a turn for the worse with complications from COVID, and then he passed away. It was a really hard hit for me. It's difficult for me to push patients from the ER into the ICU because it brings back that terrible memory of my father being admitted. It's scary to go into work and see people who get really sick really fast, who suffer, who are on life support. Sometimes people follow all guidelines and they still get sick. These people didn't expect to die. It's not anyone's fault. Prayer and meditation helped me through, as well as my faith in myself. I've been an emergency room and trauma nurse for 6 years now. The work is challenging, but I like the challenge. I like putting my critical thinking in play. On a regular workday, I walk in, I see where I'm assigned, but I never know what to expect. Everybody who is admitted to the hospital goes through the ER, so we see everything. Patients with strokes, heart attacks. A few days ago, we sent 5 COVID patients to the ICU within an hour of each other because they all needed oxygen therapy and life support. The ER is always busy, but since the pandemic started, it's been non-stop. We're short-staffed. Nurses call in sick pretty much every day, so in a shift you could have a turnover of up to 20 patients. My regular week is 4 shifts of 12 hours, and I'm often asked to take on extra shifts. I've stayed on for 16 hours, and other people sometimes stay for 20. Once, I did 6 shifts in a row. Lately, I've set a balance for myself because I need my sanity. All the waves of the pandemic have been bad, but this wave is exceptional because it seems like everybody we treat has COVID. They say Omicron is the mildest form, but there are so many cases that hospitals are bound to deal with a high influx of people who are suffering from it. This wave started getting bad last month, when a lot of people came into hospital with symptoms. Most were mild, so we told patients to go home and isolate. We're bracing ourselves because it's winter and the risk is higher. I thought to myself, well, I hope we have enough beds. Since then, the hospitals are increasingly crowded with COVID patients. Many more children are coming in with COVID symptoms than we have seen in the previous waves. They're usually unwell with coughs, sore throat, fever. There have been cold oranges at a couple of hospitals, which means there's a shortage of nurses and too many patients. I won't be surprised if we get more code oranges elsewhere. Earlier this month, Durham region had no ambulances. They called it Code Zero. We swab everyone who enters the hospital for COVID, and we just keep admitting more and more patients who are positive. The ICU currently has both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. One relatively young patient, a public health nurse, came in recently because she couldn't breathe. She was not vaccinated. I immediately put her in bed and slapped oxygen on her. She was scared and was like, I should have gotten the vaccine. We had another lady with COVID who hadn't been well for several days. I don't think she was vaccinated either. She was placed on 100% oxygen, but all of a sudden she started crashing. Hard. Every time she made a movement, her oxygen dropped. So we intubated her. At the same time, people came in with a heart attack, so my partner and I had to split really fast. We had already transferred 2 patients to the ICU during that shift. That kind of triage happens all the time in the ER. We have to decide who is the sickest and who needs our attention most. One night we were stabilizing a few COVID patients when a gentleman came in. He'd been found in a hotel room coughing up blood. He was arresting and he was breathing like he'd aspirated vomit into his lungs. It sounded like nuts and bolts in a dryer. I put him on oxygen while my partner stayed with my COVID patients. Just as I got ready to intubate him, another lady with a history of myocarditis came in with a severe chest discomfort, drenched in sweat. So we ran toward her instead, because by that point, her heart was arresting. I yelled at the charge nurse to call an ICU nurse to intubate the first gentleman because his oxygen was dropping. We put the second patient, the lady, on insulin infusions and the strongest life support medication. I kept running in and out every 10 minutes, refilling bags of medication for the woman. I managed to get her relatively stable before sending her to Toronto General Hospital to undergo a procedure for what ended up being cardiogenic shock. If the ICU is short-staffed, they can close down beds, but you can't do that in the ER. You have extra patients? Sorry, that's your responsibility today. If you're at triage, you're slammed with 50, 60, 70 health cards. You hear monitors going off like crazy, and there are probably going to be codes and arrests going off at the same time. We're running. We're short-staffed. There are children screaming and crying. Sometimes people get worse in the waiting room. It's chaotic. We're now at the point where we're reintroducing hallway nursing, which is an assignment for a nurse to see patients allocated on a stretcher in a hallway. They stay there, no private curtains, nothing. It didn't have to be this bad. The government should have implemented restrictions a long time ago, when cases started rising in the late hundreds last month. Some essential services need to run, fine, but look at what's happening at hospitals. We're probably going to have to do what we did in previous waves, when we transferred patients out of hospitals because there was no room. Will we have to open new areas, and do we have enough staff? Will we rely on agency staff? Now we're making decisions as we go. It's become critical that we don't get sick and miss out on work. As far as I know, I don't have and haven't had COVID. Outside the hospital, I take extra measures to avoid exposure. When I go home, everything goes in a tight bag. I put it in the wash and I go to the shower. I wipe my work shoes, my badge, my bags, the door handles. I still wipe down my groceries even though they get delivered. I don't really go out anywhere on my days off. Sometimes I feel like those days aren't enough, because the only thing I do is catch up with errands or chores. The cycle gets exhausting and the fatigue comes in waves. Some people don't believe in the disease or make fun of how seriously some people take it. My message is that the struggle is very real on the inside. Not everyone is going to tell you what they see at work and what they're going through. So be kind to one another. Many people are going through a really hard battle in their life right now that we know absolutely nothing about. It was really difficult for me to bury my father. It was so unexpected. And he was a wonderful person. I urge people not to take this disease lightly, to get vaccinated, to follow public health guidelines. You don't know what can happen next. You don't know what life might bring you. I've always said on this channel, there's so much going on with this disease, and there's so much going on that there's so much information. There's so many different factors, and there's the corporations and the politicians and the international communities and the medical organizations and this person says this and this person says that, and there's this going on, and there's counter this and there's counter that. I care first and foremost about what the doctors and the nurses are saying. That's what I care about. And I've always wondered, like we laid off a bunch of people here in Ontario. 700 plus doctors and nurses because they wouldn't get vaccinated. And I've always been very curious why they chose not to be vaccinated, one. But two, in the midst of a crisis, you're telling me we're going to be rid of 750 people whose crime seems to be putting themselves at risk? And more we're seeing, is that even the case? Or more and more the question is being raised, is that even the case? All I know amidst all of this is that the people who are sacrificing the most to serve their communities, to help, to be at the front line of what is going on, are explicitly asking us and explicitly saying to us, I urge people not to take this disease lightly, to get vaccinated, to follow public health guidelines. And so I will. God, I wish we had done better. I wish we had done better. Hi, JC. How are you? Good to see you. Yes, if a mutation makes COVID-19 many times more deadly, very scary, yes. And that's just... It's easy to get caught in that kind of spiral, Major. Absolutely. But we have to face it for what it is and not for what we fear it will be. That's the only way to maintain our sanity. A boy in his shopping cart. Don't know if I've seen you in the chat, mate. Good to see you. Hope you're here to contribute. 10,000 a day average coming down with COVID where I live. Yeah, that's about right around here as well. They're sending in the National Guard to help. Yeah, it's getting there. Doesn't help that it takes $250,000 and 4 to 5 years of post-secondary to be a nurse. And I think about that as well. Are you telling me there are no tasks? There's no tasks that can be done by just someone living like... It just feels like this crisis happened perfectly to mock us. That seems to be how it was designed. That if I wanted to attribute a conscious force to it, it would absolutely be perfect timing. Oh, you guys all voted conservative and liberal, eh? Oh, yeah. You got your neoliberal capitalism. Okay. Well, here's the flu +1. Oh, and it's gonna change a bit. It's gonna mess with you. Like, the Ford administration is doing fuck all. Like, fuck all. These guys are walking around being like, oh, restriction, not restriction, where's the, like, major push? And, like, the nurses and the doctors are asking for things. I've read what they have asked for on this channel. And it's not happening. Like, they are not getting the support they need. There's no major push. There's no major recruitment drive. There's no major... And more, I'm beginning to see that the reason why I think that's occurring is because Canada's conservative establishment is gearing up for another fight over privatizing public health care. Why aren't the conservative governors and premiers, why aren't they pushing forward? Why isn't there a recruitment drive? Why isn't there a move forward? Why is there cuts? Why is there an assault going against doctors and nurses in the midst of a crisis? Because the goal is to privatize it. That's the goal. Yeah, and what they'll say is the system failed because it was socialized. That we should sell off the facilities and privatize everything. That's powerful propaganda. People eat it up, and you're absolutely on the money there, Grenning. You're absolutely on the money there. Another debate about further privatizing Canada's public healthcare system is looming on the horizon, according to top right-wing voices. As Canada's healthcare system, already underfunded after decades of right-wing austerity cuts, buckles under pressure, and COVID-19's Omicron wave pushes hospital capacities to their limits, several right-wing pundits, think tanks, and newspapers have all coincidentally started to push the same message: privatize healthcare. Over the weekend, the editorial board of the right-wing National Post waded into the issue by proposing Canada's rickety health system could be solved with a snap of a finger if Canadians do away with our unhelpful aversion to allowing private sector involvement in healthcare. We cannot expect the problems the pandemic has exposed to be fixed by throwing money at the problem while continuing on the business as usual, the editorial argued. We need political parties from across the spectrum to be open to enacting fundamental changes to Canadian healthcare, and that must include a larger role for the private sector. Let the demons in. They'll certainly do a good job. Luckily for the National Post, other right-wing voices were already busy laying the groundwork for this message days earlier. On January 8th, conservative insider Ken Bosenkool drew fire on Twitter after suggesting a private health delivery could be a silver lining of the pandemic. Lampooning privately delivered public health care will be a lot harder after millions of Canadians got vaccinated at the pharmacy, Bosencool tweeted, adding that it could be one silver lining at this pandemic. The former Stephen Harper advisor and chief of staff to former BC Liberal Premier Christy Clark did not go over as well as he may have expected. Want to get aggressively attacked? Some say bullied by lefty healthcare zealots? Bosencool complained in a follow-up tweet. Step 1, describe how Canadian healthcare works. Step 2, say it should continue. Bosencool is not the only right-wing voice getting out ahead of a debate on privatizing Canada's public healthcare system. That view was also recently expressed by the C.D. Howe Institute, a right-wing pro-business public policy think tank, of which Bosencool also happens to be a fellow. In an open letter to Canada's health ministers, published in 2 parts days earlier to C.D. Howe's website, Don Drummond and Duncan Sinclair wrote that the Canadian Health Act, which provides the framework for a universal health care, a failure, and argued for more private delivery. Medicare, our label for Canada's cherished health system, is failing. Accepting the adage that the role of the physician is to prevent illness when possible and treat it when necessary, the exclusion of preventative services from coverage, whether by physicians or other providers of healthcare services, makes no sense. Drummond, a former TD Bank economist, previously headed a commission under Dalton McGuinty's Ontario Liberals that advocated further austerity cuts to public services, including cuts to Ontario's healthcare system. C.D. Howe's report followed a blog post from The Hub, an online publication that counts a number of Harper and Kenney government alumni as contributors. Sean Speer, a former senior advisor to Stephen Harper and policy director at the Fraser Institute, also pinned the blame on Canada's public system in a piece titled, "In 2022, Can We Finally Be Honest About Our Health System's Failures?" In it, Speer laments the broad public support for universal health care. It's not just that we've collectively decided to prohibit most forms of private healthcare delivery in the misguided pursuit of egalitarian goals, Speer wrote. It's that we've seemingly extended the prohibition to policy and political debates about our current healthcare system and its failings. Speer, like the others who began talking about this issue over the last week, is calling for a greater role for private healthcare delivery. So you see the demons rallying, right? You see the evil parasites coming together and organizing themselves in order to spearhead an initiative to privatize the healthcare system, which we know is a failure. It's obviously a failure. What they are doing here is demonic. It's evil, in the evilest terms. Privatized healthcare is a failure. Every single time. Good to see you, Alex. Good to see you, bud. It doesn't work. You can look at the United States to see what will happen if we privatize our healthcare system. And the people arguing in favor of it discredit their organizations. The C.D. Howe Institute, the Fraser Institute, at the very least. If these are the statements that they are coming out with, then they discredit themselves completely. Private healthcare fails, obviously. The only thing that it manages to achieve is the impoverishment of the populace for the benefit of the wealthy. That's the only thing it does. And I love this statement, incidentally. It's not that just we've collectively decided to prohibit most forms of private healthcare delivery in the misguided pursuit of egalitarian goals. See, this man here thinks that pursuing egalitarian goals is misguided. I know. Things that help people. Eh, buddy? Yep, throwing public money at healthcare is bad. Let's have private companies throw you less service for more public programs. Not there to make a profit other than benefiting from the public well-being. Yep. The fact that you need a degree to do certain professions and the degree comes with significant price tags proves that this system only works for the wealthy class. Yep. All education should be free. Absolutely. if we lived in a rational society, or a society that was capable of reason, or empathy, or compassion, or any of these things, that's exactly what would happen. But that's not who we are as a people. That's not how Canada is. Like, we really do believe that it's every man for themselves, and that the people who are starving in the streets, they just need to buck up. Like, but that's who we are, and I don't see that changing. Do you? This is an interesting article. COVID drove workers to quit. Here's why, from the person who saw it coming. I'm reading a lot of articles today because yesterday's stream was no good, and so I'm trying to catch up. I'm in catch-up mode. As American workers quit their job at near-record pace, the labor shortage is more severe and persistent than most professional forecasters anticipated. It was also inevitable, said Anthony Klotz, a professor of business administration and an associate professor of management at Texas A&M University, who's made a career of studying resignations. A year ago, Klotz predicted what has become to be known as the Great Resignation, a term he unwittingly coined for a phenomenon that has left economists puzzled, central bankers flat-footed, and the U.S. economy grappling with shortages of goods and services. While some workers finally re-entered the labor market in November, the COVID-era workforce participation rate remains below pre-pandemic levels, defying expectations for a mass return to work that would have thawed supply chains and cooled inflation. Why are so many workers quitting? Where are they going? And will they be back? In search of answers, Barron's recently spoke with Klotz. An edited version of our conversation follows. You saw the massive wave of worker resignations coming. What tipped you off? I'm not an economist, so I don't study macro labor trends. I study organizational psychology, or the psychology of work at a more micro level. Viewing it that way, there were several trends that struck me as being somewhat unique to the pandemic, and all related to an increase in future resignations. The first was a pretty straightforward backlog in quits. It seemed intuitive that in 2020, because of the uncertainty caused by the pandemic, many employees who would have otherwise quit their jobs postponed their plans. So I looked at the quits numbers reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and sure enough, there was a decrease in the number of resignations during 2020 by 5% to 15%, depending on the month. I reasoned that when vaccines became available and the economy got back online, many people would belatedly quit their jobs. The second is widespread burnout. There were lots of stories about frontline workers facing long hours and difficult conditions during the pandemic. There was burnout in parents, especially women caregivers who were juggling educating their children while working remotely. And there were reports of burnout in organizational leaders trying to manage through the pandemic. Burnout is a predictor of turnover. The way to deal with it is to get away from the source of the burnout. Some people needed a break, and many probably didn't have the ability to take a month or more off to take care of their mental health. How has the pandemic affected the way people view work? This trend is probably the hardest to get our arms around. The place of work in people's lives was shifted during the pandemic, and that made sense. There's an organizational psychology theory called terror management, which posits that when individuals are near life or death situations, or reflect on death or illness, they tend to think existential thoughts. It struck me that probably the entire world at the same time was reflecting a little bit on their lives because of the deaths and illnesses the pandemic caused. I reasoned that a number of people would come to the conclusion that they'd like to make a life pivot. Most people work to pay their bills and save for kids in retirement. How can so many afford to quit their jobs? Resigning is somewhat of a privileged move in the workforce because you need a financial resource to leave your job and have another job lined up. But what has facilitated these moves, whether they're career pivots or life pivots, is the fact that a lot of us were locked down during the pandemic and had time to sit, think, and plan to do what next. At the same time, people saved money. Some received stimulus checks. Many people cut back on their expenses because there weren't social events going on, or because economic uncertainties caused by the pandemic. There was this mass existential reflection happening. when many people had the time and the money to enact some sort of life change, from a career move to an entrepreneurial adventure to staying home. This experiment happened on a global scale. Oh, has work from home contributed to mass resignations? This experiment happened on a global scale. Millions of individuals have gone through a year or more of working from home, while remote work has pros and cons. It provides the employees with more autonomy in terms of arranging their work and lives than working in the office does. Freedom is a fundamental need for human beings, and when we get that freedom, we tend not to give it up willingly. It makes sense as the economy improved that everything opened back up. Some people would be called back in the office. Many would look forward to going back, but there would be many who would say, no, I'm not going to give up this autonomy, especially now that there are many more remote jobs available. A big share of people who left the workforce retired early. Do retirements tend to be permanent, or with some people change their mind? After the Great Resignation idea went viral, people started to reach out to me with their stories. One of the big surprises for me was the number of people who said they were 5 or so years away from retirement. They'd been working from home and now had to go back. Or they'd had an epiphany during the pandemic that they don't have that much time left and want to try something different. Some just retire early. But in many cases, people take on some sort of bridge employment, such as freelance work. I don't think retirement is an on or off switch. Some people might have done well in the stock market and fully retired, and they enjoy that for 6 months before deciding they're ready to go back into something. Work often is a source of happiness and meaning and relationships. I can see some early retirees re-entering the economy in some form. Entrepreneurship is booming. Will it stick? The autonomy that many people have experienced while working remotely is probably contributing to the increase in entrepreneurship. People are opening their minds to the idea that there are ways to craft a career beyond 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. For some people, there is a sense of resilience from having made it through the pandemic so far, and that is carrying over to the way that they view career risks. People may be realizing that they overvalued the stability and predictability of a traditional career path, and that their risk tolerance is higher than they knew. And the risk of launching a solo venture feels lower, given the high number of job openings. The failure rate of entrepreneurial ventures is extraordinarily high, so for some people who go out and try to make it work, it just won't work. But because of the internet, the online marketplace, and the pandemic speeding up a shift to a virtual economy, there are more ways than ever for employees to slowly move into entrepreneurship while working at their current job. And many people can use the savings they accumulate during the pandemic to slowly grow a business, as opposed to raising venture capital and launching all at once. What types of companies are best positioned to win in the struggle to attract and retrain workers? The easy answer? Companies that have complete flexibility in terms of where their employees work, and those with a lot of cash or big profit margins. Some companies are offering sabbaticals and flexible scheduling to their workers to help deal with burnout, but not all can afford that. Companies with smaller margins, lower wages, and in-person workers are going to be the most constrained. That's where we're seeing the most turnover, because they don't have as many ways to stem resignations. As companies invest in productivity or compensate for lost labor, do we risk permanently losing too many jobs? There's a tension between individuals and business owners who feel like the work ethic has changed and nobody wants to work anymore. Some individuals are saying they want to work, but not just any job. And there is this thought that many unfilled jobs may be replaced with artificial intelligence or robotics over time. That raises the question, what jobs will be left, especially jobs for those with less education? Are we going to have good jobs with livable wages that humans can do? Or do we need a complete rethink of what work is and how much we work in exchange for getting a living wage? Policymakers talk about returning to a pre-pandemic labor market. Is that possible? Technology around automation is expensive, but as the labor shortage pushes up the cost of human labor, some of those investments become financially feasible. I would hypothesize that organizations that have heavily invested in AI and robotics over the past 18 to 24 months because of the labor shortage and questions over whether people will ever be able to work in close contact again. The other piece that I think about has to do with individuals embracing remote work. Before, companies recruited locally. But as many jobs went remote, organizations realized they can recruit globally and potentially save money by hiring remote workers somewhere else in the world. Part of what I worry about is that it creates a global marketplace for work, and US workers are more expensive than other workers in other parts of the world. Thank you, Anthony. That final question, right? Yet another hit to the American mindset and the American lifestyle. I rather like this one because it was very frank and very open and very honest. Like, I feel like he wasn't attempting to try to convince anybody of anything. He was just kind of stating as he saw things, and I value that. I value the idea that and I also really appreciate listening to people like this man's clearly a pro-capitalist, but I appreciate that he's speaking the way that he speaks without demonizing the workers, right? Oftentimes when capitalists speak, there is this sense of demonization. Workers are lazy, workers are this, workers are that. This felt very honest. So I valued that. I wanted to share. And honestly, I think I am more or less of the opinion, like, technically what I am doing here is entrepreneurial, right? I work this job, right? And then I work a capitalist job. And I also read audiobooks, right? Maybe that's going to start paying out. We'll see. I'm actually halfway through a project right now where I'm reading an audiobook for an author who is actually fairly well established. So we'll see. Wouldn't that be cool? That'd be so fucking cool. I would be so over the moon if I started to like record that and it actually started to pay out. That'd be the coolest thing ever. Yeah, damn. That'd be so cool. Anyway. But like, technically, I suppose that I'm one of these entrepreneurs, right? Technically, I suppose that what I'm doing here is a business, right? And it's completely based on this idea that like, fuck this whole capitalist thing. Like, fuck this whole thing. Like, it's like, what are we even participating in? What are we even doing? Yeah, no drops tonight. Yeah, don't say that out loud. We'll see. Library Genesis is free. Information is free. It's the degree certification. Yeah. Well, and you kind of come to a point where you're like, why can't I just walk in and take the test? Like, give me whatever test you want, right? I feel like there are some subjects that I could walk in the door and write whatever test you want and just be like, yeah. Doesn't China have free education? China actually just went through a nationalization of their education system. That they eliminated private institutions from their education system because what was happening is it was erecting a new class, right? And so they're like, no, the whole idea of this project is to eliminate classes. And so, bye-bye. I know public health care has failed, but how could we make it fail harder? Yeah, exactly. Good evening to you, Eric. Depends on how an individual learns. Some individuals need class instruction. We can't all be will hunting. Yeah. Working from home is pretty sweet, though, yeah. I know people who are loving it. I'm trying to get a friend to read the first chapter of the Capital Volume 1. Yeah, that's a tough one, dude. Thank you, Alex. Good luck with that. Thank you. An anarchist group has been going around in New Orleans vandalizing Confederate statues. Fucking good for them. It's called the Real Mau Mau Liberation Front Professional Party Planning Committee. I wonder if they're calling themselves Meow Meow in order to try to indicate that this is a Maoist party, right? But instead of saying Mao, right, they're saying Meow Meow, right, so that they can like kind of obfuscate it a little bit. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. The myth of skilled labor versus unskilled. Yeah, we have people making $25 an hour should be making $50 an hour, arguing that people making $15 an hour shouldn't be paid a living wage. Yeah. Someone's, I think, the most revolutionary thing we can do is start our own business and reject capitalist constructs. Yeah. Like, and like, my position is like, we're in the midst of a climate crisis, right? Like, if I think that this job is contributing to the climate crisis, I don't want to do it. Like, all jobs are going to, because we are facing like large scale structural issues collectively, right? We're not going to individualize our way out of it. Like, that's childish. We have to respect that there are large scale systemic changes that happen. Like, even this job even what I'm doing right now is contributing to the climate crisis because I'm consuming electricity, right? That electricity goes on the grid, and the grid is charged by, well, here in Ontario it's a bit different because it's hydro, but like, so it's not burning coal or like burning fossil fuels as much, but like, some are worse than others. Doesn't China's social credit system create classes just by nature? The social credit system is not much different than the credit system here in America. Like, it really isn't. It really exists as a way, like, if you want to like start that business, if you want to do something, well, we need some kind of system to see, okay, like, to what degree should we actually trust you, right? And like, it's the credit system that we have, basically, like, for the most part. I know that the West says you need to privatize your healthcare and everything will be fine, give you money. Yeah, exactly. Like, we're so fucking gullible that we'll probably let people do it. The ruling class loves to pit workers against each other. Yeah, that means that we're not fighting against them. Yeah, the social credit system is like a FICO score, mostly just for loans, debts, etc. Yeah, it's not much different than our credit system, right? Like, it's not much different. What is it, buddy? I got my pug. He's sitting over here. He's whining at me this whole time. What's up? What's up? Is it peanut butter? Is it peanut butter? What's up? Do you want some peanut butter? Let's hit you with some peanut butter, buddy. Peanut butter puggy time. Peanut butter puggy time. Peanut butter puggy time. Way back, way back, way back, way back. Yeah, let's play. Give Milo butter, 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 butter. Peanut butter, peanut butter. Whoop, 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 whoop. Yeah, you guys didn't think there was going to be like a peanut butter break, did you? You guys didn't think I was suddenly going to get out of my chair and start giving my pug peanut butter while talking about it. Here you go, buddy boy. You're such a good little boy. Such a good little boy. Here you go. Peanut butter time. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly in a baseball bat. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly in a baseball bat. It's so difficult saying no. It's so difficult saying no. He looks at me with his eyes. He's looking up and he's just like, oh, I just want the peanut butter. And I'm like, I can respect that. Well, our credit system doesn't determine your quality of education. Their credit system doesn't do that. Like, I'd be very surprised if their credit system operated that way, right? Like, and they very recently, like, China very, very recently went through their education system and removed, like, privatized. Like, they want to see more standardization across their education system. They very specifically do not want class dynamics. Like, that's what they're trying to eliminate from their society on purpose, right? And also, I was referring to China in regards to the privatized healthcare system. Yeah. I mean, the privatization of healthcare is observably, like, it fails observably. Like, it doesn't, and it no longer takes a genius. Like, literally just talk to the people themselves. Like, the people of America are suffering badly because of the privatized healthcare system. Like, it's very, very bad. And I've seen an interesting commentary of why the American system, like, why the Americans are responding so badly to it, is because people don't actually have regular access to doctors, right? Because to even see a doctor costs hundreds of dollars, right? And so if you have, like, people who don't have access to healthcare professionals easily, right? Well, what do you think's going to happen, right? So I'm seeing many commentaries that are saying that the reason why the American system is not responding is because of its privatized healthcare system, and that you need a public option, because people need to at least talk to a doctor, right? Like, how much of this crisis would have been alleviated in America if people could just go to their doctor and be like, hey, what should I do? And the doctor be like, vaccinate, put on your mask. It's like, well, there's my doctor, right? He's the doctor, right? Like, we criticize Americans so much for, like, they're not listening to the experts. But, like, to see a doctor costs hundreds of dollars, right? Like, it's not that they're not following the advice of the doctors. It's that they don't see doctors. Like, they can't get the advice from their doctors, right? And then of course, in America, it gets so heavily politicized. So then it becomes a political issue, and one that is not even about expertise, because the experts aren't in the conversation, because they can't be, because of the financial barrier that exists between the populace and the doctor, which is because of the privatized healthcare system. So it's been like a total fucking disaster for them. The whole voting with your dollar is another individual thing that perpetuates the myths we can change thing with our individual actions. Well, and the voting with your dollar, like, it's explicitly a tacit admission that there are some people who get more votes than other. Like, you're essentially saying that the whole system should skew towards the rich, right? Yeah, then you have the whole debate between Rand Paul, Dr. Fauci. Yeah, and depending on which side of that conversation, right? Like, you think Rand Paul's the bee's knees, or you think Dr. Fauci is the coolest guy in the room, right? Like, but because everything's become so, like, heavily politicized, it's not even useful. Like, it's not really useful, the conversation that's happening between the two of them. It's another form of theatrics, and it's annoying. It's become very annoying. Like, the whole conversation happening in America, it's tough to watch. It's tough to watch because it's so annoying. I won't worry about that. This is an interesting thing that I saw, because I had spoken about Robert Malone, and how interesting it was that like, he was poking some holes in, he had a lot of credibility. But now we're seeing a group of doctors coming together, and this is not a small list, right? Every one of these is like a nurse practitioner, right? Nurse practitioner, physician, right? Like, all the way down the list. Like, you can see how many doctors and nurses have signed this. A repudiation of what Robert Malone was saying on Joe Rogan's podcast, attached to a letter to Spotify, an open letter to Spotify, to have them remove this, what they consider misinformation. Now, I've attempted to reach out to some of these people, because I can't seem to find, like, a good debunk of what Robert Malone is saying. But this is worth showing people that while Robert Malone has thrown a lot of shade into the conversation, a big one in my view being that if somebody dies of, like, a gunshot wound, and then they found to have COVID, that they count that as a COVID thing. That to me, I was like, yeah, that seems very credible, right? And Malone really was just, like, bringing shade. I'll just read this letter to be specific. On December 31st, 2021, the Joe Rogan Experience, a Spotify exclusive podcast, uploaded a highly controversial episode featuring guest Dr. Robert Malone. The episode has been criticized for promoting baseless conspiracy theories, and the Joe Rogan Experience has a concerning history of broadcasting misinformation, particularly regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. By allowing the propagation of false and societally harmful assertions, Spotify is enabling its hosted media to damage public trust in scientific research and sow doubt in the credibility of data-driven guidance offered by medical professionals. JRE 1757 is not the only transgression to occur on the Spotify platform, but a relevant example of the platform's failure to mitigate the damage it is causing. We are a coalition of scientists, medical professionals, professors, and science communicators spanning a wide range of fields, such as microbiology, immunology, epidemiology, and neuroscience. And we are calling on Spotify to take action against the mass misinformation events which continue to occur on its platform. With an estimated 11 million listeners per episode, JRE is the world's largest podcast and has tremendous influence. Though Spotify has a reasonable responsibility to mitigate the spread of misinformation on its platform, the company presently has no misinformation policy. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Joe Rogan has repeatedly spread misleading and false claims on his podcast, provoking distrust in science and medicine. He has discouraged vaccination in young people and children, incorrectly claimed that mRNA vaccines are gene therapy, promoted off-label use of ivermectin to treat COVID-19, contrary to FDA warnings, and spread a number of unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. In episode number 1757, Rogan hosted Dr. Robert Malone, who was suspended from Twitter for spreading misinformation about COVID-19. Dr. Malone used the GRE platform to further promote numerous baseless claims, including several falsehoods about COVID-19 vaccines. Is this going to take me... Hold on. No, this is just... Okay, sorry. About COVID-19 vaccines and an unfounded theory that societal leaders have hypnotized the public. Many of these statements have already been discredited. Notably, Dr. Malone is one of two recent JRE guests who have compared pandemic policies to the Holocaust. These actions are not only objectionable and offensive, but also medically and culturally dangerous. The average age of GRE listeners is 24 years old, and according to data from Washington State, unvaccinated 12 to 34-year-olds are 12 times more likely to be hospitalized with COVID than those who are fully vaccinated. Dr. Malone's interview has reached many tens of millions of listeners vulnerable to predatory medical misinformation. Mass information events on this scale have extraordinarily dangerous ramifications. As scientists, we face backlash and resistance as the public grows to distrust our research and expertise. As educators and science communicators, we are tasked with repairing the public's damaged understanding of science and medicine. As physicians, we bear the arduous weight of a pandemic that has stretched our medical systems to their limits and only stand to be exacerbated by the anti-vaccination sentiment woven into this and other episodes of Rogan's podcast. This is not only a scientific or medical concern. It is a sociological issue of devastating proportions, and Spotify is responsible for allowing this activity to thrive on its platform. We, the undersigned doctors, nurses, scientists, and educators, thus call on Spotify to immediately establish a clear and public policy to moderate misinformation on its platform. Signed. And there's the list. And this woman here, Jessica Malady Rivera, is where I heard of this. And unfounded theory, people have been hypnotized. Even I didn't believe this one. I was just like, nah, it's not a mass formation psychosis. Like, I mean, there is a hysteria going on, but the hysteria is capitalism itself. Right? I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure healthy people spending hours in line to get a virus test is mass formation psychosis in action. Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. Experts debunk mass so they're focusing on the mass psychosis COVID theory, right? Like, which is somewhat convenient. Like, I don't think that everything Malone said was something to be, like, specifically for me, right? Malone pointed out, and I think that there is accuracy to this, and I haven't seen anybody challenge this view, that if someone dies of an alternative cost, I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to stop you right there. That's fair, Alex. That is fair. It is fair to establish who I am and where my role is. I'm a commentator. I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it does seem to me that people who are dying of other health concerns are also being that's being ticked off as COVID death, right? And that's inflating the numbers. Oh yeah, well, but it is fair to say. No, it is fair to say, right? And again, the reason why I'm really bringing this up is because, like, I am interested in hearing what someone like Malone has to say, but you can't ignore the backlash against it, right? Like, this is fairly overwhelming, right? Like, this is fairly overwhelming, right? Like, Malone is one man. Well, one of my friends in the state who's a doctor says that he disagrees with the belief. With which belief, Eric? Sorry. Like, he disagrees with the mass formation hypothesis? Like, even I don't like that we're focusing on that, because honestly, even I was like, yeah, there's no way. Like, that's not what's going on, right? Sure, there's probably fear, like, sure, there's that kind of stuff, but, like, the idea that what is happening because of some sort of mass formation psychosis, like societies can be overwhelmed by hysteria, like, it does happen, but, like, I'm not sure that taking scientific and medical advice from Joe Rogan is perhaps the most productive way for people to get their information, said communications director Kate Bedingfield at the time. But again, the problem is that where are people supposed to get their information? They can't go see a doctor. Doctors are expensive, right? Like, why do you think this is happening in America? Right? And what I think is interesting is that they're really focusing on this mass psychosis statement, right? Which seems to be what this is also about. And they're not focusing on many of the other claims that Malone was talking about, right? The one about labeling non-COVID deaths as COVID deaths. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good to hear, Eric. Because, like, again, there is so much going on. Is it possible that a person with a gunshot wound and COVID might have survived a gunshot wound if they hadn't had COVID? Yeah, I mean, again, like, now we are entering into pure speculation, right? And you guys know me, I don't like to be too speculative on this. That's a big reason why I don't talk too much about COVID, right? Because there's so much speculation. And there are lots of people in the conversation who really want to jump on speculation, right? And like, this goes all the way back to, like, the lab leak stuff, right? Remember when the lab leak stuff was really going around and people were really about the lab leak? My whole position that whole time was, show me a source document, like, show me an investigation, show me something serious, right? I'm open, but I'm not going to speculate, because speculation turns into truth. And then the truth becomes the foundation by which entire narratives are erected. And then it becomes much harder to go and pull out and say, wait a minute, this was speculative in the first place, right? This wasn't a fact. This wasn't verified. It just became the truth. And so I try very hard to stay away from that, which again is why I wanted to bring this up, because I brought Malone to the podcast. Malone was brought into the conversation on this show, and I think it is worth pointing out that there is an enormous pushback by a lot of people, by a lot of professionals, on Malone. Like, a lot. Like, this is really a lot. Like, a lot. You know? And that can't be ignored either. Yeah, he's trying to pin the lab leak on of course, right? Because the QAnon crowd has taken over the Republican Party, right? So of course he's trying to pin the lab leak on Fauci, and of course, like, Rand Paul is just espousing what his base wants him to espouse. He's fighting the fight that will get him reelected. That's it, right? Like, that's it. He's not actually interested in any of it. He doesn't actually care. He's not actually sitting there, like, pounding on the pulpit. He just knows who's voting for him. Like, he knows what his base wants. And, like, his base is saying, Fauci's probably the lab leak, right? And so he goes on record, and he's like, I'm on record fighting against Fauci and the lab leak, right? But, like, if his base was sitting there being like, we think that Fauci is a demon baby from Mars. Tell me, Mr. Fauci, when were you a demon baby from Mars? Wait, you mean politicians can be opportunists? What? I don't think having Spotify making misinformation politics is going to help things much. I mean, Facebook has one. They still have that problem. Yeah. Well, it's not like Facebook actually gives a shit. Like, Facebook's entire algorithm is fucked. Like, it's untrustworthy on the face of it. On the Facebook of it. Hey. I saw a CBS article claiming a 60-year-old man who died of a gunshot wound among 7 other people were counted as COVID deaths. It cited another CBS article, which then cited the initial CBS article. Yeah. Rand is making money off of his optical blovations. Yeah. And there is a lot of money going around, and there is this kind of stuff, and political, and the what I do think is interesting about this is the focus on the unfounded theory that leaders have hypnotized the public. So, this is interesting. Dr. Malone used the GRE platform to further promote numerous baseless claims, including several falsehoods about COVID-19 vaccines. Okay, click on that. And that takes me here. And I don't know what I'm... Oh, okay, this is a thing. Okay, this is like a thing. Okay, hold on. Maybe I can get this to fit. There we go. So this is what they're referencing. Unbiased script code joke. This is what I care about the most. Like, including several falsehoods about COVID-19 vaccines. Like, if you're in the conversation and you're saying things that are wrong, we should know what those things are. Right? So, Robert Malone, MD, is a virologist and immunologist with an MD from Northwestern University. In the beginning of the pandemic, Malone was involved briefly with a drug repurposing trial for COVID-19. Malone has proclaimed himself the inventor of mRNA vaccines. He is not the inventor of mRNA vaccines. He participated in some early research looking at delivery of mRNA into cells. Well, already. So his claims of being an inventor is interesting. He has spread COVID-19 misinformation through the pandemic on nearly any platform he can. He is fully vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine. He recently joined Joe Rogan on his podcast shortly after being suspended from Twitter for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. Here, we discuss the faulty claims made. Lipid nanoparticles. Changes in the menstrual cycle occur due to lipids that are part of the lipid nanoparticle. That's the claim. Malone references a study where lipid nanoparticles were detected in ovaries of rats. He makes an unfounded connection between menstrual irregularities and lipids in the vaccine as a result. He fails to mention that this study detected less than 0.1% of the total lipids administered in rats' ovaries 48 hours after vaccination. That is not a significant accumulation of lipids at all. Menstrual changes have been reported after both mRNA and adenovirus vaccines. Any potential link is likely to be a result of the immune response to vaccination rather than a specific vaccine ingredient. Our uterus is part of our immune system. Anything that affects our immune response, stress, a pandemic, vaccination, COVID-19 itself, can impact menstrual cycles. Claim: spike protein. Almost all side effects have to do with the spike protein. Malone claims that because the spike protein of the virus and the mRNA vaccines are the same, the side effects of them are the same. He fails to mention that the virus itself contains numerous other genes and proteins, including the spike protein that enabled the virus to infect us, reproduce, cause damage to our bodies and cells, and potentially kill us. The spike protein made from the vaccine does not have the additional components that can lead to the type of damage infection with SARS-CoV-2 can. Spike protein. The spike protein should have been made less toxic. There is no evidence that the spike protein itself is toxic. Toxic means a substance that kills cells. The vaccine is one of the best safety protocols of any vaccine developed. Side effects after vaccination are not an indication of toxicity. They are an indication of immune system activation. Long COVID and post-COVID symptoms are indistinguishable. Malone makes this claim with no evidence. There is data that shows more than half of those who had COVID-19 have symptoms that persist 6 months after illness. The same is not true after vaccination. Long-term or serious effects after vaccination are extremely rare. These vaccines are rigorously and continuously monitored. Vaccination. Being infected with SARS-CoV-2 prior to vaccination leads to more adverse side effects. Immune responses to vaccination vary. There is no rule about more severe side effects after illness. 4.7 billion people have received at least one vaccine dose worldwide. Have a good one, Alex. Good to see you, bud. Vaccine responses depend on individual genetics and immune system function, which can be impacted by a number of factors. Vaccination. Multiple vaccine doses suppress T cells and cause high zone tolerance. The majority of vaccines we have are multi-dose regimens. Multiple doses of a vaccine amplifies protection against illness. The immune response to vaccination involves many complex interactions between immune cells. Malone makes claims such as this repeatedly using science-sounding buzzwords with no data to support his statements in an attempt to garner credibility with listeners. And on it goes. I think I'm happy. I don't think I need to get too specific anymore. In regards to the specifics, especially because I don't actually understand what I'm saying. I gotta be really honest with you guys. I don't actually understand what I'm saying. So it's like, that's what these people are saying in response to claims that are made. This is actually, vaccines shouldn't be the only solution to protect COVID-19. Vaccines are not the only solution to control COVID-19, but they are the only preventative. There are available treatment options after the illness develops. Post-exposure, so prevention vaccines, post-exposure, monoclonal antibodies, antivirals, right? Treatment in the hospital, blah, 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 oxygen therapy, blah, 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 blah. Common ground, using grains of truth to gain trust. Media and losing faith in science. The constant media warfare, clickbait headlines, and politicization of science and vaccinations undermines trust in science. This is especially true when people, like Malone, spread disinformation that sounds credible to those who are not in the field. VAERS is imperfect, but it is the best we've got. Reporting of vaccine side effects through VAERS is a flawed, but it is the only widespread surveillance system we have. However, conclusions based solely on VAERS, which Malone has done, should be cautioned against. Changes in vaccine efficacy. As new variants emerge, vaccines become less effective, and the formulation of dosing may need to be updated. However, we need to slow the spread of virus through vaccination to slow the emergence of new mutations, not avoid vaccination, as Malone suggests. The irony is that Malone criticizes these items listed above, but he has, himself, exploited them to mislead people and spread lies. Ask yourself, complex science is difficult to communicate. It can easily be misunderstood or confused, especially for someone outside the field. It can also be intentionally manipulated to mislead people. Next time you listen to or read Malone's statements, or anyone's, remember these logical fallacies. Appeal to authority to gain traction. Just because someone has a position of authority or credentials doesn't mean they are credible. Malone uses this tactic along with punctuating statements with science buzzwords to try to appear legitimate. False dichotomy. Making blanket statements presented with only either-or outcomes. This is a common strategy used by those opposed to vaccines because vaccines are not 100% effective. Remember, there is a spectrum of outcomes due to COVID-19. Appeal to emotion, mentioning things like uncommon cancers appearing after vaccination without any scientific proof in an attempt to scare people. Hard to deny, guys. Like, really. Like, I'm having a really hard time looking at this Malone figure and being like, there's a lot of people pushing back and their argument seems pretty good, right? Seems pretty well sourced, seems pretty well done, right? Honestly. By the way, I'm one of those people who have a long-term effect of the vaccine. I'm still willing to get the second dose, and the doctor refused to give me a second one. You know what he sounds like? Well, he looks like he's another JP. Oh, yeah. I don't understand what you were saying either, so you're good. You said it all well, though. Oh, thanks, Major. That's all that really counts, right? As long as you look good or sound good saying it, right? That's what really counts. Anyway, I wanted to present that because I have talked about Malone on this. Lots of people hit me with like, hey, Robert Malone, you have to look into Robert Malone. I have looked into Robert Malone, but the problem is like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, I don't know any of this shit. And so here's a guy who seems to have some credentials, right? He sounds good at what he's saying, but this pushback, right? Pretty. I'd like Joe Rogan to have some of these people on his podcast, right? Like, this is the thing that I keep kind of noticing about Rogan, right? Have you guys noticed it? I've definitely noticed it. There are some issues, like his central thesis. His central thesis of his show, the reason why he feels that he can platform far-right speakers is because he then turns around and platforms leftist speakers, right? That's always been his justification, that he doesn't want there to be an echo chamber, and if you just ignore right-wing people, then they're off in the right wing and all that, and let them speak and then speak to them and have them all kind of come together to create either a middle ground or to create a consensus. That's always been his argument. But there are some issues where Rogan doesn't do that. He defies and belies his central thesis, right? The trans issue is one, which is why Joe Rogan is a transphobe. You can say it pretty clearly now, right? Like, Joe Rogan is a transphobe. He's had plenty of time to platform a leftist trans-right activist, right, on his podcast. And if he had have done that, I would know. Like, there are trans people in my life. I would for sure be aware of this, right? And if he has done that, anybody can show me at any time, right? I'll gladly watch the thing. But it seems to me like he's more interested in platforming people who confirm his bias, right, than he is in challenging that bias. And it seems like that's the same here. That Rogan has platformed many people on the anti-vax side or the skeptic side of the conversation, but I don't see him platforming a lot of people who are coming forward and being like, this is what is going on. Like, this is the evidence, this is the science. Like, platform this woman. Bring this woman on, right? Like, here's a laundry list of doctors. Bring some of these people on, right? Like, why are we platforming the controversy, right? Like, it does kind of become a point where like you're like the media in the climate change conversation, right? They would report on the both sides controversy, right? Oh, the science isn't in. Well, the science is in, right? Like, have these people on your show, and it's odd. It's odd that he doesn't. It's odd that he doesn't. Like, one would assume that a person who's genuinely interested in the pursuit of truth, like, sure, has somebody like Robert Malone on, but like, there's no lack of it. Not only that, Joe Rogan has used a lot of anti-vax treatment and as well anti-vax statement. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's all about, honestly. Like, I really am not. Anyway. It's certainly not helping the situation. Like, that's certainly the truth. So. And then we find out that Joe Rogan is part of, like, a CIA psyop, right? He keeps having CIA people on his show, like Mike Baker, right? He's all part of a CIA psyop, right? Like, the CIA wants to spread infection through the populace for whatever reason. Because at this point, it's like the CIA wants to spread the infection because the CIA is just the CIA. It's like, oh, hey, an opportunity to hurt people. Well, we live in Hell's Cape, where Joe Rogan is the go-to for the truth. Well, it does tell you, though, like, that you're onto something there, Eric. Like, Joe Rogan gets 11 million viewers on average, right? The next the next news competitor, right? Like if you're talking about news, is Tucker Carlson with 3 million. Like, and yeah, he for sure is slipping further to the right. You can observe it. His move to Texas, as well as, he got a $100 million deal from Spotify, right? He's not immune to the corrupting effects of wealth, right? Like $100 million is a lot of fucking money. It's a lot of fucking money, right? You can easily detach yourself from reality with $100 million. Like, it doesn't take that much money to disconnect from reality. And to me, like, Rogan has observably made that shift. And also, like, because he's in Texas now, right? At least when he was in Los Angeles, he was surrounded by, like, there were lefties that he would, like, go to the comedy club, right? He would go out and do shows and stuff, and he would encounter, like, socialists and leftists, right? He's in Texas now, right? How many socialists and left-wingers do you think he runs into, right? And so, and because he is as corruptible as anybody from the allure of wealth, right? Like, more and more and more, he's beginning to double down on this individualism, just work hard, grind set, right? Just grind set, right? It's like, yeah, okay, like that works to a degree, dude, but like not all of us are like it's weird how Rogan moved from, dude, this whole podcast was so lucky, and like I can't even believe it. I was just fucking around with friends. Like I was just doing all that to like, I'm here because of my grind set. You know? Like, and that move is observable. You can see him make that shift. And I know for a fact that someone at some point is going to actually make a video of the clips of that shift. Right? It's not going to be me though. I don't have the patience for that. But like, it seems to me like that shift is observable. I witnessed it myself. Like and the move away from YouTube into Spotify was like, and the move from Los Angeles to Texas, like Rogan changed. He changed. The Great Barrington Declaration. It seems that is the obvious secret ideal for the ruling class of the Western world. Uh-oh. What's this? The Great Barrington Declaration. That has a real, like, I feel like the Great Barrington Declaration. I feel like I should play a harpsichord. An infectious disease epidemiologist and public health scientist, we have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health impacts of the prevailing COVID-19 policies. What am I even looking at? Coming from both throughout the light around the world, we have devoted our careers to protecting people. Oh yeah, so just like... Oh yeah, okay. Do it! Do it! No, Eric, I'm not gonna do it, dude. That would require, like, literally, like, hundreds of hours. Like, hundreds of hours of listening to, like, all of his podcasts. And then, like, clipping the relevant clips. And, like, no. Like, no, dude. That's like a PhD thesis level amount of work. Like, no, thank you. Like, not even remotely interested. Like, not even remotely interested. I need Yetis. How you doing, bud? Good to see you. Hello, mate. All right, let's move on from this. That was an interesting dive, dude. I'm glad that I did that, though. Oh, Joe Rogan. Pretty Joe Rogan. Pretty Joe Rogan. Man, when Joe Rogan retires, who's going to fill that vacuum? Are you sure it is because of the COVID-19 policies or because people finally have time to discover themselves and their political beliefs instead of being jammed into a factory all day? Yeah, it means let the virus rip through the population. Barrington Declaration. Dude, that really does... That, like, extra makes it like harpsichord music. The Great Barrington Declaration. Simply let the virus take over. Yes, many of you will die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. Yes, yes. Dee 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 dee. I need to get a harpsichord. Just have it like right here. Ugh. Book bans in schools are catching fire. Black authors say uproar isn't about students. You know what, man? Another article. I'm gonna read this one. You know why this really caught me? I worked in a toy store for about 5 years. I sold this book, right? I've read this book because I believe in reading the things I sell. If this book is getting banned, it is because of racism. Period. Full fucking stop. Like, full fucking stop. There's no defense of banning this book. It's literally a story about a black kid who is new at school. That's literally the story. And it's not even like about race relations. It's just like the kid is black. Like, he's a new kid at a new school, right? And he faces all the problems that new kids at school would face. And, oh, incidentally, he also happens to be black. Banned! Yep, pretty racist, man. Parents and patrons initiate more than half of all book challenges in the U.S., compared to 1% from students, the American Library Association reported. Nearly 6 months ago, celebrated black children's author and illustrator Jerry Craft received a message saying some of his books were being pulled from a school library in Texas. I was caught off guard, Craft, the Newbery Medal-winning author of the 2019 graphic novel New Kid, told NBC BLK. I felt bad for the kids because I know how much they love New Kid and Class Act. I know what my school visits do. I felt bad if there was going to be some kids that were not going to be able to take advantage of that. The person who sent the message to Kraft is from Katy, Texas, a town near Houston that has been under fire for attempts to limit the public's access to books that teach about racism. In October, the Katy Independent School District made headlines for temporarily yanking 2 of Kraft's books, which tell the stories of black boys who experience racism in schools, from school libraries and postponing his virtual visit. A now-deleted petition with more than 400 signatures showed parents calling for Kraft's visit to be canceled. At the time, Kraft tweeted that he was shocked by the accusations. Apparently, I'm teaching critical race theory, Kraft wrote in response to a parent confused about the ban, citing the decades-old academic and legal framework that teaches about racism in America. While the Texas school district reinstated the book and rescheduled his visit, Kraft is among dozens of black authors whose work are being pulled from school libraries under the pretext that they're teaching critical race theories. Most of the books are targeted for ban don't teach critical race theory, but are written by and about people of color. I mean, so what if they do? So what if they do? That's something that this article doesn't seem, does it get into that? Fight for schools, work stressing. Let's just get to the bottom of this one. Yeah, when the vast majority of stories being centered and being called things dangerous tell the stories of historically marginalized communities that directly reflects on students that their own stories and their own lives aren't fit for consumption either. Yeah, dude. I've never met a young person that has been afraid to read my work, Reynolds said, adding that opponents are doing everything they can to shield young people from things that scare them, not things that scare the children. And so what if you write a book that's about critical race theory? I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. Critical race theory is the framework that is used, the legal framework. It's university level shit. If you could make a children's book that somehow talked about critical race theory and make it consumable and interesting, yeah, people should read that. That'd be a major success. That's a university level thing, right? That you're talking about the historical and legal framework by which even the United States talks about the impact of systemic racism on black communities and black people, right? Yeah. Ad Gooch. How you doing, bud? Hey, bro, I did some serious thinking about what you said the other day. Well, that's always a good start. Always, I know that hurts my brain when I do it, bud, so good luck. You are right. Capping the wealth is the only logical move to advance humanity. Boom. I've converted yet another one. Dun, 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 dun. Glad to hear it, bud. Because honestly, like, we put caps and limits on all kinds of things that are dangerous, right? We just need to admit that mass wealth accumulation is itself dangerous. That's it. That there is no intrinsic benefit to having a billionaire, and it causes a lot of damage just by having them exist. Like, we don't let people do lots of things. We don't let people speed, right? Why don't we let people speed? Well, the argument is, well, if they're speeding and they get into an accident, they're far more likely to die and hurt others, right? So we put a speed limit. So if we have a speed limit, well, why don't we have a wealth limit? And why is the idea that a person, if they have all of this wealth, can cause damage not intrinsically understood? Like, it seems pretty fucking obvious. What do you think about change? Has there been any changes or updates that excite you recently? Changes. 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 Not really. Like, everything's kind of stagnated. Like, that's the reason why I'm so fascinated by China, because they are the ones that are doing the changes. Like, China recently built an enormous battery solar panel plant so that they can transition away from fossil fuels. That's cool, right? Like, that's pretty fucking cool. Like, it's a battery and solar power plant that, like, dwarfs anything we've done here in North America by a good amount, right? I had that article ready to go one day, but I didn't get to it. Is that what was here? Maybe I can actually find it. China battery power plant. China is building its first huge battery storage facility. This isn't the article that I was thinking of, but this is still pretty cool. When completed, this will be China's largest virtual power plant. The Chinese government approved their plans for a massive energy storage grid in Gansu province on Monday. The project is scheduled to be completed this coming year, according to Bloomberg. Like, that's pretty fucking cool, man. Oh yeah, there's also like the nuclear fission shit that's happening in China, right? China fission. Oh, it's yeah, like China's artificial sun just broke a record for longest sustained nuclear fusion. My mistake, fusion. Superheated plasma reached 126 million degrees Fahrenheit for 17 minutes. Pretty fucking cool, man. In a new record, China's artificial sun project has sustained a nuclear fusion reaction for more than 17 minutes. In the latest experiment, superheated plasma reached 126 million degrees Fahrenheit. That's roughly 5 times hotter than the sun, which radiates a scorching 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface and about 27 million degrees Fahrenheit at its core. Coal and natural gas are the primary energy sources currently used, but these materials come in limited supply. Nuclear fusion could be the cleanest energy source available because it replicates the sun's physics by merging atomic nuclei to generate large amounts of energy into electricity. The process requires no fossil fuels, leaves behind no radioactive waste, and is a safer alternative to fission nuclear power. The recent operation lays a solid scientific and experimental foundation towards the running of a fusion reactor. Like, that's pretty fucking cool, right? That's pretty fucking cool. Or how about China quantum computer? Like, how about this story? Right? 2 of the world's biggest quantum computers made in China, right? Like, a quantum computer with enough complexity, for instance, enough components, known as quantum bits or qubits, could in theory achieve quantum advantage, allowing it to find the answers to problems no classical computer could ever solve. In principle, a quantum computer with 300 qubits could perform more calculations in an instant than there are atoms in the visible universe. In 2019, Google argued it displayed such quantum primacy. Right? Yeah, exactly. Oh, socialism, it doesn't innovate. Socialism doesn't innovate. Ignore the fact that who were the first people into space? Who were the first people into space again, you guys? Was it the Americans? Was it capitalism? Did we get to space from capitalism? Oh, it was the communists. Boom, 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 boom. That would also make capitalism or communism fully viable. Yeah, providing the laws stay in place and root out corruption. Yeah, the corruption is the worst, man. That is the worst. Like, stop it with the barking. You're barking at nothing. You're barking at nothing. Yeah, that's a good boy, buddy. Thanks, bud. Then you have libertarian who wants to remove speed limits because it infringes on people's freedom. Yeah, right. Like, no, more and more the libertarians are revealing, like, they are kind of the dark, they are the dark heart of, like, the capitalist death cult. Like, these guys are literally, like, if the libertarians had their way, we'd have children back in coal mines, right? Like, well, just don't, you know, if you don't want to work in a coal mine, just go get a better job, right? Like, that kind of fucking thinking. And like, libertarians are incoherent. Like, they are extremely incoherent. This denial of systems, this just idea that we're all somehow intrinsically equal in the system, which is false across the board, right? Like, there are people who are massive wealth inheritors, right? And like, it's like they refuse to acknowledge the existence of monopolies. They refuse to acknowledge the existence of like mass that corporations can take over political systems. Like they live in short, they live in a fantasy world. Like that what they are espousing is a delusion. Like, it's not based in evidence, it's not based in facts, it is incoherent. And the libertarian argument for healthcare, in my view, like, that's the oddest, because like, we have like over 100 successful experiments with the public option, right? The public option has been tried and it works better than the private model. And the libertarians show up and they're like, oh, that we just need to do more of the private model, right? So it's extremely experimental, right? No other nation has done it that way, right? So why wouldn't you at least at first set up some option that actually works, to actually take care of your citizenry initially, and then if you're so convinced of it, run an experiment. Like, run a small scale experiment. Pick a state, right? Run your experiment in some state. See what happens. Like, one of the things that's one of the things that's interesting about China is that because it has such a huge population and because the population is so dense, it's actually really easy to run economic experiments. And the Communist Party of China does run economic experiments. They pick like a small, but like they pick like an area that has like 1 million people in it, right? So literally like a city block. Not quite, but you understand. And they run an experiment, and they make it run for like 5 years or whatever, and they see what happens. And sometimes it's a total failure, and they know it, right? And they know it, which is why when they run like failures like that, they try to make sure that they don't run the same or they don't run another experiment on that same group of people, because it's gets pretty fucky pretty fast. Want to see a libertarian economist? This is an actual professor who actually argued that we should be able to pay $6 an hour because it's better than zero. Yeah, right? Like, by that argument, like, why not make it $1? Right? Like, well, $1 is better than zero, right? Like, oh, just because it's like, no, libertarians have like brain rot. Like, they really do. It is at this point a form of brain rot. Like, they're not interested in facts or evidence or any of that kind of stuff. And many of them, like, there's one guy who has like the Elmer Fudd lisp. I can't remember his name offhand, but he's got that what be very very quiet. I'm hunting for rabbits. Like, he's got that kind of lisp going on, and that guy's just a fucking sociopath, straight up. Like, he is fine if like people die, slavery comes back, like all of that, because freedom. Like, whoa, bro. Like, whoa. Tax the real estate speculators, make it hurt. I actually think I read this the other day. Yeah. Those who have profited most obviously from the financialization of housing will complain loudly, and they have the resources to amplify those complaints. But our elected officials need to steel themselves and remember the speculators gobbling up our housing stock only get one vote. The rest of us should take note as well and realize we massively outnumber them. But this article actually kind of set me off, and today's video was actually because of this video, or because of this article. Because, like, it understands intrinsically that there's a problem. Right? That they're they're making it. They're stating it like it's clearly this has to stop. Right? Like, this has to stop. But then their solutions are lame. Their solutions suck. Right? Their solutions blow. Oh no, a 2% tax, a 10% tax, 100% tax. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, these guys are billionaires. Like, they don't give a fuck about your dumb tax. Right? Like, they're just gonna pass that on to the next person. So it just ensures that the price is set and it's going to pass on, right? Like, they don't... Herbert Achternbusch. I don't know who that is, but my condolences. My condolences. Thoughts on failure? Inevitable? And anything specific you want me to talk about on there, Yetis? Because it's a pretty fucking broad subject. Like, failure. I mean, it's more likely that you'll fail than you won't fail. Fail better. Keep failing. Like, in truth, everybody is just a failure. We all fail eventually. Time makes failures of us all. There is no such thing as a successful person. That the idea that there are successful or failed people is a myth entirely. The entire structure of our lives is mainly illusionary in the first place. The universe has decreed that we need food and shelter, so everyone should have it. Nobody needs to earn anything. We're all just temporal visitors here. And shouldn't this place be nice? I don't know. I'm just swinging. But, like, take houses away from rich people, give them to poor people. Like, done. Be done with this. Be done with the negotiation. Be done with the, like, we're gonna tax you, right? Like, fuck that. Fuck that. Like, take the house, give it to the person without a house. How do we move past the shortcomings of our humanity? When is it safe to admit failure? It's never safe to admit failure. You should do it anyway, because it makes you stronger. People respect it. In the end, they admit. When a person who admits that they have failed and moves forward from that failure is seen as stronger than a person who refuses to admit their failures and who staunchly refuses to acknowledge that they have failed. But it is never safe to admit that you have failed. Someone will always shit on you for it. And honestly, in my view, that's how you carve out the difference between the people who you need to keep around you and the people who you can throw away. Because if you're going to hold it against someone that they tried something and failed, and that they admit they failed, well, then we don't need to keep you around. very simply. And how do we move past the shortcomings of our humanity? You don't. You don't move past the shortcomings of your humanity. You learn to accept the shortcomings of our humanity. Watching the stream with my girlfriend, we both love your stream. Isn't that nice? I'm so happy to hear that, bud. That's so nice. Hello to your girlfriend. I'm glad you're doing well. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have somebody to share time with. It's nice to be with someone. Isn't that lovely? What a lovely thought. Now I've got an image of the two of you. You're like sitting there. You've got like a fireplace. You're like all wrapped up. You've got like cocoa, right? That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Yeah. How lovely. Like, we don't like to really talk at all about the fragile temporal nature of our humanity. We like to talk about our death a lot. Like, we like to say, like, oh, the existential threat of our death. But, like, we really don't like to address the fact, like, there are myths in our society that are so well entrenched that they're just taken as a given. Like, we are the apex predators. Like, we are at the top of the food chain. Like, those sorts of things are just sort of blithely said. And it's like, no, we're not. Like, we are not at the top of the food chain. Right? We're at the top of the murder chain, maybe. Right? Like, we are effective killers. But the universe eats us back. Right? Like, this myth that we are the top of the food chain creates this pyramid, this hierarchy, this hierarchical structure that we're all supposed to believe exists, right? In regards to our place in the natural world, so that we are at the top of like this pyramid, which is of our own creation and exists exclusively in our imagination. Because the truth is that the universe eats us back, right? Like, sure, it might not walk over to us and whack us on the head, right? Sure, it might wait until we peter out, right? And die of our own, of the fact that this place kills us, right? But it eats us back. That if there is such a thing as an apex predator in this conversation, certainly it is creation itself, right? But we don't honor that. We don't honor the reality that the natural world that we live in is itself a system that has rules that we have to adhere to, that we try very hard to treat that as an externality. The neoliberal capitalists literally call it an externality, that the natural world and the environment and the quantum energy that we are and that sustains our existence that's all externalities. We don't need to pay any attention to that whatsoever. So that's like an enormous myth that we exist with on the day-to-day. I don't know why I got talking that way, but I did. What advice do you give to a younger couple to do in this death cult? Oh my god, dude. Advice. Advice is tough to give. I don't like giving people advice. I really don't. Because I generally find, like, in my life, the people who were giving me advice were really just kind of confirming their own biases and confirming their like, doing what they wanted to do, right? They were just telling me what they wanted me to do. And they were putting their wishes and dreams on me. And so I don't really like giving advice. But, like, community organization, meaningful engagement, yeah. Like, do what you can do what you have to do in order to make money. Right? Because you have to. That's the game. But reach out to community groups that are around you. Reach out to social groups. And if you can't find it, then you are the social group, dude. Like, that's my kind of advice to maintain your sanity or to do something, right? To mobilize yourself. Find, like, the Extinction Rebellion down in my description. Socialist Action. That's an organization that I work with. Third-party, non-political, like, non-affiliated groups. So not the Liberals, Conservatives, or NDP, or Greens, or any of that. But people who work within those groups. right? Create voting blocks, create community blocks. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors. Make a tray of cookies. Send it around your neighborhood with a little note, right? Like the community organization, meaningful engagement with that. That is the beginning of fighting the capitalist death cult. Yeah. Because as they abandon us, right? As they abandon us, right? We need to be prepared for that abandonment. And we are going to have to abandon them back, right? Like that's the whole thing. They are abandoning us, so we need to abandon them back. And so getting involved in your community, getting involved in like community gardens, getting involved in these sorts of things, it's going to be key. It's going to be crucial. And start doing it now. Start doing it now. And I mean, I can't stomach working for like this job thing. Like I'm just like, nah, no thanks. But I know people who do, right? And they're successful at it, and they're doing fine, getting their money, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to do that, off you go. And really, honestly, Yetis, like, I'm really like, we are quantum beings. Like we aren't these meat and flesh and bone things that we like biologically. Like, yes, we are that, sure. But when you go deeper and when you find out what we are intrinsically made of, we are made of light. We're a quantum creature. We're a quantum creation. We're the afterthought of a dying star. Like we're the echo of another universe's explosion. Like we are a sound wave and a light particle. Like that's what we are, right? And we are sustained by a force that is the collective nature of all things, right? This is quantum mechanics. I'm not even talking theologically, right? Like quantum mechanically, this is what you are, factually. You are a being that is here temporarily. You are primarily a visitor, right? Like, and it doesn't matter how hard you try, and it doesn't matter what we build, and it doesn't matter what we do, it will all blow away in the dust. And so, it is extremely likely, it is far more likely that when you are in pursuit of advice or when you are in pursuit of what it is I am to do, it is far more likely that the force that is responsible for emerging your consciousness into this reality, it is far more likely that that force has more to say about what you should be doing and what should be done than any other individual who is just existing around you. And so I strongly recommend. This poster is not just here for my own entertainment. It is not here because I think it's pretty. It is here because there is an intrinsic internal self, an internal universe. There is a deep universe that exists within yourself that is worthy of your exploration and discovery. And within that, you will find the shard. You will find the shard of your action. You will discover what it is you can do, what it is you should do, what it is you want to do, and pursue that. Pursue that relentlessly. And I mean this extremely seriously, and I understand it's a touch paradoxical, ignore advice. You know what you should do. You know what you should do. The quantum energy that birthed you, supports you, and will ultimately reclaim you, sent you here with that shard. It sent you here with that shard. And only you know what it is, and only you can move on it. And anybody who tells you that you shouldn't pursue it, or that you shouldn't do it, don't listen to. And because what you will find is that as you pursue it, you will fail, you will fall over, you will run into a wall, you will X, Y, and Z and all kinds of things. And then as you move past it, you will find that that was always part of that journey. And like Barnabas, like all the advice I got was just gaslighting. But even if it's well meant, right? Because another person simply does not know. Asking another person what you should do with your life, like, you're never going to get a good answer. Nature always refuels the soul. Nature has our back when we need to recharge our batteries. Exactly. Exactly. Take more seriously the idea that you can connect to your internal self, and that your internal self is an infinite depth. Take that concept more seriously. People do be projecting. Yeah. There's a lot of projection. Lots of projection. Lots and lots of projection. I mean, that's what you get that from like the boomer generation when they're like, "Oh, just go shake his hand," right? It's a bit of projection, honestly. Most people don't really want the truth. They just want constant reassurance that what they believe is the truth. Yep. Yep. The hardest thing for a person to do is deal with themselves. That's why we're constantly asking other people's permission, why we're constantly looking for other people's advice, why we're constantly seeking other people's this, that, and the other thing, why we're constantly pursuing hobbies, why we're constantly pursuing work. I know people who have sacrificed themselves completely to their job, that their entire personality is their job, that everything they do is about that. And the only conclusion that I can draw is that the hardest thing, by a lot, the hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. That simply the act of being alone in a room by yourself will be the most difficult thing that you will ever face. Like, solitary confinement is a punishment in prisons. Why? But that work, that's where you're going to find it. This is a lesson I learned through my interactions with depression, that I have actually come to see depression as a ultimately positive force. Because depression is your subconscious, your internal self, saying to you, your external self, it's time to stop. It's time to be alone by yourself in a room for a while. And it forces, the universe forces itself upon you. It forces you to do it. That if you attempt to continue doing what you are doing, if you continue to attempt to ignore your internal self, your subconscious self, the universe will lay you down. It will put a weight upon your chest that will make it impossible for you to stand. But it's through that process, that forced introspection, that you will find the shard, that purpose, that meaning, that answer to that question. Why are we here? Why am I here? What is it that I am here to do? What is it that I am here to accomplish? And whatever you pull out of that, you can call it your instincts, your gut feeling if you like. You can call it anything you like. But whatever you pull out of that, that's the truth for you. And you're the only one who can find it. I love talking about the quantum mechanics and all that shit, dude. I love it. Because something I think doesn't get articulated a lot is that because we are all quantum beings, we're all made of the same thing. We're all a singular energy. That I am one aspect of the quantum energy. So are you. And when you talk to me and I talk to you, we are two aspects of the same energy communicating with itself, attempting to figure out what in the hell are we doing here? What is all this? We are attempting to negotiate with one another, even on just basic levels of how do we live together? How do we even pass the time until the moment the quantum energy reclaims us? And what is the purpose of all of this and what we are doing here, right? And in a scary kind of way, I don't think the energy knows either. That it's our communication with one another that is the universe attempting to discover itself and its own purpose. That we are the shards of the universe attempting to discover itself as we delve inside of ourself to discover our own shards, to discover our own meaning. It's very cyclical and circular, but I definitely think that that's what's going on. To the degree that any of that makes any sense. And I really do think that it cycles in such a way that the energy will only discover the fullness of itself through the moment of recreation of itself. That it will, that through the process of its self-discovery, it will come together and then release and recreate all of itself, and the process will begin anew. Yeah. It's kind of fucked up. Like, it's kind of fucked up. It does do a lot of things thinking this way. Like, we're all familiar with the concept of the problem of evil. Right? I have always identified as a vessel for wrath. Uh-oh, here we go. Romans 9. Paul's anguish over Israel. I speak the truth in Christ. I am not lying. My conscience confirms it through the Holy Spirit. I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. For I could wish that I myself were cursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my people, those of my own race, the people of Israel. Theirs is the adoption to sonship, theirs the divine glory, the covenants, the receiving of the law, the temple worship and the promises. Theirs are the patriarchs, and from them is traced the human ancestry of the Messiah, who is God over all, forever praised. Amen. I don't know why I read that, but that's cool. Dude, everyone should read the Bible. Oh, get out of here grinning. Citing Bible verse. You're like literally like, yeah, Romans 43. Yeah, Romans 43:12. Yep. Yep. It's like that Homer Simpson scene where he's like, yeah, well, like the pastor is in his house and the pastor's like, he cites some Bible verse and Homer goes like, well, never forget Matthew 10:12. And the pastor's like, and Jesus came and sat amongst them and ate bread. And Homer's like, yeah. Think about it. You should read a passage from a ball that's chosen. Oh yeah, could do. Dude, I can talk about this quantum mechanics shit forever. That's really fascinating to me. Like the thing that kills me about the modern, what's going on in the modern world, is that we have this like quantum mechanics thing that acknowledges mathematically that there's a singular energy. And then all of the theologians and like all of the religious talkers and all of like the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Hindus, right, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, like all of them are like, yeah, this is all a singular energy that we call God or we call the Vet or we call like the Brahma or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's all a singular energy, right? And then the quantum mechanics guys are like, the secularists are like, yeah, we've mathematically shown that there's a singular energy that underpins all of creation. And I'm like, don't you guys, don't you think that there's a bit of a moment happening there? No? You're just gonna ignore that? Okay. And what's annoying is that, like, the scientists, the secularists, right, the atheist types, will be like, Isaac Newton was the brilliant, most genius person that was ever a genius. And it's like, Isaac Newton was one of the most influential theologians of his day. Right? Like, so you want all the math and you want all the science and you want all the discovery, but you don't want any of the theology, right? You don't want to actually listen to Isaac Newton talk about the nature of reality and the existence. Because, like, I actually think, like, I really hate I really think that I hate the question is there a God? It's an annoying question that I really hate. That really lets the conversation, it mires the conversation in semantics. Like, that is essentially the outcome of the entire New Atheist movement. Like, the entire New Atheist movement really did come out the other end with them being like, really illustrating that they have a semantic misunderstanding of what God is. And while simultaneously arguing in favor of their own illiteracy. Like, they were great when it came to talking against the evangelicals, because it was wonderful to see some people shit on the evangelicals finally, because the left church wasn't. But like but when it came time to actually have like a theological discussion based in reality and based on the scriptures and the texts, they were illiterate and would defend their illiteracy, right? And this semantic misunderstanding allowed them to create icons like the spaghetti monster, right? We're all familiar with the spaghetti monster. But the spaghetti monster is like a being that exists within the universe, right? It's like a person, but it is a spaghetti monster. And it's like, that's literally like, you can't misunderstand what's happening more, right? Like, we're talking about a singular energy that underpins all of this. That quantum mechanics shows us by what is happening, right? Like, the quantum mathematics shows us that this energy that Newton, Aquinas, Augustus, the Vedas, the Buddhists, right? They all talked about, right? And they called it God, right? Or the Brahma. The creative force that underpins all of this, right? And so the real question isn't, is there a God? Which I find to be a useless question. The real question that I think is worth answering is the quantum energy sentient? We know it's there. We know it's created all of us. We know we are it and it is us. Does it have something resembling its own sentience? I'm going to leave that question with you guys because we're at the end now. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being standing around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the pale hope that you won't realize it. Because if you do, you might just put together that your existence is just as valid as theirs is. And that's going to make you a lot harder to enslave. Fuck them. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.